What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is a story where Issei was a supernatural hunter. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations. And by the way, this time we have two stories in one video. The first is Issei the supernatural killer or hunter. And the second one is, what if Issei was the son of the legendary demon hunter Dante? Now, let's get into the first story. Downtown in the busy streets of Tokyo was a man with black hair that carried some streaks of blonde walking through the streets wearing a professional business suit along with a trench coat. The man kept walking past buildings until he reached a basic ramen shop. Looking at the sign for a moment, he let out a sigh before entering the establishment. Immediately, he garnered the attention of a bunch of people as the man walked up to the counter. The chef waved him in. "Good evening. What can I do for you?" the man asked, making the older-looking man stroke his goatee. "I'm looking for a guy named Issei Hayato. Is he here?" the man asked, making the chef nod. "Yes. He is here in one on the second floor. But can I get you something?" the man answered while gesturing for the stairs to the side. The man nodded as he started walking towards the stairs. "Just some sake or anything with alcohol will do," the man replied as he walked up the stairs. Sounds of a TV playing in the background was heard as a bunch of men were sitting by their tables looking at a game of football, soccer for those that are confused. The man's eyes darted around the room until they landed on a man sitting alone. He was eating a big bowl of ramen along with some other small treats. The man's hair were dark brown, being a bit messy, but giving his giant build it gave an intimidating aura. It reminded him of someone else working in the church whose physical presence can make anybody scared. His eyes was the same color as his hair along with the small cut scar on his lips. The man slowly made his way towards the man who appeared to haven't noticed him as he kept eating while discreetly taking glances at the TV screen. The stood now in front of him as he spoke up to the muscular man. "Yao Hayato. It has been a while." The man spoke to the eating guy who swallowed the food in his mouth before looking up and giving him a small smirk. "Azazel. Didn't expect you to visit me. How long has it been?" "For years after my last job for you. Here for another job for me," the man named Issei Hayato said, making the other man named Azazel smirk at him back as he sat down by the table. "Indeed. It's a very important one." Azazel nodded as he continued. "It's a long-term job with the main goal: stopping the second coming of the Great War," Azazel revealed. He could see that Issei's interest had peaked as his eyes turned to Azazel, gesturing for him to continue. "Go on," Issei said while taking another bite. "Your target is Kokabile, one of my strongest underlings and a massive warmonger. He wants to restart the Great War and decided to hide his base in Kuo, the town where both sisters of the current two Devil Kings, Lucifer and Leviathan, are residing. He pretty much keeps them currently hostage without them knowing, and any interference of our side he will dispose of them, which will trigger the war. Because the current Devil Kings are very attached to their younger sisters, this will give them the motivation to restart the war," Azazel explained, making Issei raise an eyebrow. "But should they be protected or something? Like, why are they in the human world?" Issei asked, confused, making Azazel close his eyes. "Hell if I know. The only thing I know is that both heirs of the Gremry and Citri clan have great interest for the human world for some reason," Azazel replied with a shrug. Issei kept eating his ramen before resuming the conversation. "And let me guess, the reason why he hasn't killed them yet is so he can find a way to bring the angels to Kuo as well, making it the perfect starting place for the Great War to resume," Issei theorized, making Azazel nod. "Right on the money. That is why I need you to take him down, as well with the other Rouge fallen angels with him. So that's why I need you to go to Kuo in the next days so you can take down one of Kokabile's underlings. Her name is Rainier, and she is currently in Kuo with three other fallen angels. They somehow got their hands on an exiled nun named Asia Argento who has the sacred gear Twilight Healing. They also stole one of my sacred gear removal devices before they left the Grigori. I think I don't need to explain what they are after," Azazel informed as his drink arrived. Azazel took a sip as Issei finished his bowl. Yeah. They want their sacred gear, but nobody can get close because they are in the devil's territory. So have they already taken the sacred gear?" Issei asks as he drank some tea. Azazel shook his head as he raised two fingers. "No, but they will in 2 days. For them to be able to steal a sacred gear, they need a ton of magical energy, and the device uses the energy of a full moon, which happens to be this Sunday," Azazel answered. Issei nodded as he relaxed his head on his fist. So what's in it for me? From what I understand, you want to deal with these underlings and then go hunt down Kokabil. I'm expecting a much bigger pay than last time. Issei negotiated, making Azazel chuckle. Money first, huh? You haven't changed from the last time we've met. Azazel chuckled. Job first, money after. Issei merely smirked as he drank his tea and stood up. Azazel was slightly surprised at how much a giant Issei was. He stood over 190 centimeters tall, as well as having a very muscular build that was visible even through thick clothes. The only thing that looked apart was the black ring Issei wore on his index right finger. Fine. I'll deal with the small fry. But what about the warmonger thou? Issei asked, making Azazel muse. You might not like it, but I had the idea of sending you to school to be undercover. Azazel suggested, making Issei confused. School? Issei asked, making Azazel chuckle. Yeah, as a teacher since you look dash. Azazel was about to say something else, but Issei interrupted him. I'm 18. Issei cut Azazel off, who looked surprised at him. Azazel looked him up and down, and had a genuinely surprised look on his face. From what he could tell was that Issei at least looked 25. His build and sharp features did made him look older, but such a difference was insane even for the likes of Azazel. You're 18? Azazel asked in shock. Issei nodded before walking off to get some more tea. He walked past some man in his 30s as the man turned around and walked into Issei, which caused the man to drop his food on the ground and fall on his butt. Issei didn't look bothered as he simply walked past him and filled his teacup. The man on the ground looked angered and stood up. Hey asshole! The man yelled to Issei, who drank some of his tea. He grasped Issei by his shoulder and tried to make him turn around. But Issei didn't even budge. Hey! I'm talking to you. The man kept yelling as Issei refilled his cup again before turning around and giving the random dude raised eyebrow before walking past him. The man looked offended as he turned around and took a step towards Issei's direction, but he misplaced his step as he stepped right into his own spilled food, making him slip and fall face first into the ground. Issei didn't turn around as he sat back at his table. Azazel looked slightly surprised but gave a small smirk. Well, perhaps you can go as a student, but of course I need you to be undercover and not cause problems with the devil princesses. Azazel explained. Issei just drank his tea as he looked back at Azazel. I don't mind working undercover. But if these princesses keep bugging me, then I won't hesitate to put them in their place, Issei stated. Azazel let out a sigh before placing his chin on his fist. Well, nobody is gonna stop you. You did defeated Xerxes and Graphia at the same time, so nobody in the devil faction is a major threat to you. But for both of us, try and keep it on the low. Azazel somewhat pleaded, making Issei roll his eyes. Fine. But you handle all the paperwork. Then I'll do the dirty work, Issei stated, making Azazel nod as he raised his hand for a handshake. Deal. Azazel agreed as Issei returned the strong handshake. Also, Valley asked if you're interested in a rematch. Azazel asked, which Issei gave an amused chuckle. Brat still can't get over his loss against me, huh? Maybe after this job I might entertain him, Issei replied as he finished his second cup and stood back up and gestured for Azazel to follow him. Issei walked over the still unconscious dude and left the ramen shop along with Azazel. Both men walked towards the park as Issei had his hands in his pockets and aimlessly thought about something. You seem to be thinking about something, Azazel. What is it? Issei asks directly, making Azazel sigh. Forgot your senses are so sharp. Well, I was hoping we can finally attain a long-lasting peace after all those thousands of years of fighting. You know, just peace along with my former enemies, Azazel muttered, making Issei think. Well, God and the Devil Kings are dead. It might be possible. Issei somewhat agreed, but Azazel was surprised by something else. Wait, you know about that? Azazel asked, making Issei look confused. Know about what? Issei asked. God's death. Wasn't that public knowledge or something? Issei asked, making Azazel shake his head, making Issei realize. Whoops. How do you know about that? There are very few people that know about that secret, Azazel demanded, making Issei shake his head. Can't say sorry, Issei denied, making Azazel let out a sigh. Anyhow, that still doesn't explain you, Issei Hayadu. A human with no supernatural background, no sacred gear. But you alone pose a giant threat to the entire world, seeing that you killed the so-called untouchable Norse god Baldur, and after that you fought against Xerxes and Graphia and defeated them both. My question is how? Azazel asks, making Issei chuckle as he cracked his neck. Would you believe me that a mistletoe was the thing that killed Baldur? Issei asked, making Azazel confused, but Issei continued. And for the devils. The reason I didn't kill them was they weren't my targets. They just wanted revenge since I killed one of their noble clan heads for some money. Issei revealed before turning to Azazel. Azazel narrowed his eyes. Nothing made sense to him. How can a human slay a god and defeat the strongest devil and strongest queen by himself? He received the reports from Odin himself and Ajuka, who both confirmed that the murderer was just a human. Many minor deities have fallen to the young man whose name only Azazel was aware of. But because of the public news of Baldur's death, he was nicknamed by many pantheons the supernatural killer. Azazel knew keeping the information about such a dangerous entity hidden was a bad move. But Azazel knew better than to try and plan something against Issei, or else it might cost his own life. Azazel, who was in deep thought, looked towards Issei, who sat on a bench with a knowing smirk. Relax, Saz. So long nobody puts a massive bounty on your head, I won't target you. But that aside, when it comes to you making peace and shit, that doesn't mean I'm all for it. Remember, I care about the money above all else, not about war or peace. So remember that before thinking I will work for you again after this job, Issei stated. Azazel just nodded before looking up for a moment, thinking about what he should do. When he looked down, he saw that Issei wasn't there anymore. He looked around before scoffing. Fucking monkey. Waking up from a deep sleep, Issei Hayato stood up from his bed and lazily walked over to the bathroom to brush his teeth. After cleaning them and washing his face, he stepped out of the bathroom and put on some comfortable clothes, which were his black shirt that was hugging his body very tightly and showing off his giant muscles and abs, along with some gray jogging pants and kung fu slippers. Issei's eyes immediately darted towards the phone. As the moment he looked at it, it started ringing. Walking over, Issei picked up the phone as he heard Azazel's voice spoke from the other side. Sup, killer. Things are in place. I've heard from my spies that the fallen angels have captured the Holy Maiden and prepared the sacred gear removal ritual. It's in the abandoned church in Kuo. I need you to save the girl from dying and then bring the fallen angel named Rainier to me. The rest of them aren't a concern to me. That's all. Meet me afterwards in Pluto Bay Street 69 to finish things up, Azazel instructed, making Issei nod. Gotcha. See ya. Issei hung up the phone as he looked around the room before shrugging. It wasn't his room to begin with, as he passed the bed where an unconscious woman was laying on the mattress with a silly smile on her face. Later, babe. Issei then left the hotel as he looked around the city before finding a taxi and entering it. Cool. Issei simply stated, as the chauffeur was too intimidated by Issei's presence to even stutter, simply nodded and took off. After a long ride, Issei exited the taxi and left some bills for the chauffeur. Issei looked around and took in the fresh air. Shit, it reeks of devils. But I smell a bunch of crows too, 2 dragons and a cat. Issei put that question in the back of his head as he honed his senses and locked onto the fallen angels and ran towards the direction of the church. Inside of the basement of the church, a woman with black hair, a sexy body, was smiling sadistically as she watched the blonde nun that was crucified to some cross device. It's almost time, the woman said to herself. But suddenly a loud crash roared through the church as 3 people ran downstairs. It were the Gremry devils. Matsuda, Koneko, and Kiba. They ran down as Rainier turned to them with glee. You 3 are too late, she yelled, but her eyes widened as a sudden blur headed towards her direction, as in a single moment behind her the device broke down as Asia was gone. What? What happened? The jockey asked as he didn't saw what happened. They were all surprised as suddenly Asia was in Matsuda's arms. I don't know, Kiba replied, as suddenly a blur passed through them again, as suddenly a whole load of bodies dropped on the floor dead, which were the bodies of the excommunicated exorcists. But right in front of them the blur stopped, showing a large man with Rainier unconscious on his shoulder while holding a katana. She isn't your problem anymore, Issei said, bored, as he started walking back up the stairs. The trio couldn't move because the powerful presence, like they would be killed the moment they did something without his permission. Koneko of all people looked like she was about to shit bricks. When he was gone, the trio slowly turned around to look at each other, as they all slowly turned towards the direction of the stairs. What should we do? Matsuda asked, making Kiba close his eyes. We should inform Rias about this immediately, Kiba replied as he tried to call his master. But much to his surprise, she didn't pick up, and after a moment Kiba got worried. She isn't picking up. Koneko's eyes widened in horror. She and Akeno are upstairs. she stated as Matsuda looked horrified. They perhaps are with that strong guy, he yelled as he ran up the stairs with Asia in his arms. Koneko and Kiba ran alongside him as they walked up the stairs and saw their master and queen talking with the man. I said, hand over the fallen angel, Rias demanded with a red aura around her. And what if I don't, princess? You gonna call your big brother? Issei replied with a giant smirk. I won't bother my bother with this, Rias stated, making Issei chuckle. Right. Probably because he still hasn't healed from our last altercation, Issei replied, confusing Rias, but Issei continued. No matter. The bitch is coming with me. Now move, little bats. Issei ordered, annoyed, but Rias ignored him. No. Hand her over to us now, Rias demanded with her aura flaring. Akeno also rose her aura, but unlike her master, Akeno looked far more intimidated compared to her master. Blind arrogance runs in the family, it appears, Issei muttered in response as he dropped Rainer's body on the floor and looked back towards Rias. I've told you. I'm not here for you or any little devil. My job was to get this crow and deliver her in one piece. Now, I say this again. Leave me be or else you're gonna get a fist against your already dumb-looking face, Issei warned as he cracked his fists. The other devils walked up while hearing Issei and get afraid of what might happen. Rias' eyes twitched in anger at the insult and fired a blast of destructive energy at Issei, who boredly flicked the blast away with his fingers. Rias and her peerage looked in absolute shock at Issei casually flicking Rias' attack like nothing. What? Rias yelled in surprise. Issei just smirked as he appeared before her and looked her dead in the eyes. Stupid girl. Rias' eyes widened as Issei suddenly grabbed her by leg and threw her all the way to the roof of the church and making her crash against it before falling back on the ground unconscious. Rias. Matsuda yelled as he handed Asia to Koneko and then ran up to Issei. Boost. Issei heard Matsuda's gauntlet as the Red Dragon Emperor ran up to him and punched him in the face. Don't you dare. Matsuda was cut off when Issei just removed his head and looked at him with a raised eyebrow. Is that all? I expected more, Issei said honestly before chuckling. You must be new to this. Well, better to learn now than later. Here is a tip. Don't go into a fight blindly or else this happens, Issei said before giving Matsuda a hard punch to the face which sent him back to the basement unconscious with most likely a concussion. Kiba looked shocked as he narrowed his eyes and dashed at Issei with a demonic sword. When he got close, Issei just raised his hand and blocked it with a single finger. Huh. Kiba sounded shocked as Issei just let out a yawn before bending his finger and snapping the sword into pieces. Sword birth, huh? The sacred gear that allows the user to create demonic sword with different abilities. But you are still an amateur at using it. My friend can create swords that can hurt a god. Keep training, little knight, Issei said before bitch slapping Kiba hard enough that he fell unconscious. Now up for you two. Do you two want to dance or do you a brain inside those skulls? Issei asked before walking over to the terrified Akeno, who trembling shook her head no. We don't need to fight, Akeno replied while shaking. Issei narrowed his eyes a bit before grinning and leaning close next to her ear. Perhaps not fighting with hands, but maybe in bed. I can tell you're getting off on this, you slut, Issei whispered, but he already knew that the car girl could hear him. Not that he cared. He simply stood up and gave Akeno's ass a good smack, which she yelped in response. He then walked over to Rainier and picked her up and swung her over his shoulder before walking out of the church. He turned around right when he was about to leave. Oh yeah? Tomorrow I'm gonna attend your school. So tell the other devil in charge that I'm here for a job and not for trouble. See ya in class, devils, Issei informed before leaving. Both Akeno and Koneko looked both horrified, with Akeno being aroused as well. What should we do, Akeno? Koneko asked, making Akeno shake her head. We need to get them healed up immediately. I'll inform Sona of what happened as well, Akeno stated as she called Sona Citri and informed her of what happened. With Issei arriving at the location that Azazel told him, Issei entered the house without even knocking as Azazel, who was busy playing games, looked up. Issei, can't you knock? Azazel complained as Issei just walked in and dropped Rainer's body onto the ground. If you locked your door, then I would've, Issei replied before he walked over the fridge and took out 2 beer bottles and sat down on one of the couches. Now, the job's done. What is my pay? Issei asked as he opened one of the beers with his teeth before jugging it down. Issei handed Azazel the other, who just sighed and sat down as well. It's laying by your feet, Azazel replied, making Issei confused as he looked down at the unconscious body of Rainer. Really? She is my pay? Issei asked, not impressed. Hey. She is very well looking for a fallen angel and has basic skills such as cooking, cleaning, and doing chores. She is also a decent strategist. I thought that it would be perfect since I was about to excommunicate her for the shit she pulled in Kuo. But she would do well as an assistant for you. Azazel explained as Issei just rolled his eyes before nodding. Fine. Her ass is fat, so that's good enough. Issei muttered to himself. But she is weak. Can't you put her through some training program first to boost her strength? I don't want to babysit her for being too weak. Issei asked, making Azazel roll his eyes. Fine. So long you do your job in Kuo, I'll train her so she isn't too useless for you. Azazel accepted, making Issei give him a thumbs up. Good. Now to tell her. Azazel then snapped his fingers as Rainer woke up. Lord Azazel. Rainer asked in shock as Azazel just scoffed at her. Silence, Rainer. You went behind my back to try and obtain a sacred gear from an exiled nun by using one of my sacred gear removal devices in the territory of the Sisters of the Devil Kings. I had to send my client to stop you before you could have possibly started a war. Because of your actions, I've decided that you aren't part of the Grigori anymore. From now on, you're the personal servant of Issei Hayato over here for the rest of your life. Azazel said straightforwards. Rainer looked sad, but she knew she fucked up by going behind her leader's back. So swallowing her pride, she nodded. I understand, Lord Azazel. Rainer replied. Good. Now Issei. Anything else you want to discuss? Azazel asked in a more casual tone as Issei just shrugged his shoulders. Not really. Just train the girl when I'm school. But I expect her home when I'm done. Issei replied before standing up and heading towards the door with Rainer following him. See ya. Issei left with Rainer as Azazel looked at the door with a grin. That was easy. Killing two birds with one stone, Azazel said as he looked back at his game. Issei's POV. As Issei was walking towards the nearest hotel with Rainer walking anxiously behind him, Issei was getting bored of the awkward silence and glanced at the sexy fallen angel. So your name is Rainer. Not bad for a fallen angel, Issei casually said, making Rainer look up in surprise. What do you mean not bad? My name was chosen by God himself, Rainer yelled offendedly. Geez, it was a compliment, girl. Don't get your feathers in a twist. I've met a bunch of fallen angels girls, but you have the best name out of all of them, Issei clarified. Rainer blinked before nodding as she ran up a bit, so she was now walking next to him. And what's your name, big guy? You look like you are from Japan, but your body is much bigger than the usual, Rainer asked, which made Issei chuckle. It's Issei. And you aren't wrong. None of the people in Japan are like me. Well, none of them who are fully human anyway, Issei answered, which shocked Rainer. You're fully human? I thought you were some kind of hybrid. Then you must be a sacred gear user then, Rainer assumed, which made Issei laugh. Ha. Nah, babe. I don't have one. I'm just a regular guy with a shit ton of weapons and a strong body. No magic powers or sacred gear, Issei informed as he shoved his hands in his pocket. Rainer eyed him suspiciously as she tried to sense something. But the problem was, she didn't sense anything. And with anything she meant anything. No aura, no presence, no bodily scent or life force. He was like a ghost. Not even a ghost. More like a hallucination. I'm very much real, Issei said, outlook which surprised Rainer. Are you a telepath? She asked, making Issei shake his head. Nope. It's just that many have the same thoughts while trying to figure me out. Let's just say that I'm just a very special case of a human, Issei vaguely said as they neared a love hotel which was the closest in the area. You don't mind, do you? He asked, making Rainer puff. Of course not, she replied, making Issei nod as he entered the building with her right after. After buying a room for a night, Issei and Rainer made it to their room and relaxed in the comfortable zone for all. Rainer sat on an other zone for all as Issei enjoyed a sake from the small fridge. So what was your idea with the nun anyway? Why go after her gear? Issei asked as he took another sip. Rainer, who also had a glass, took a sip of hers as well before answering. I was tired of staying in the lower ranks, so I guess obtaining a rare sacred would give me a boost, Rainer admitted. Issei just silently nodded as he let her speak. When I heard about the excommunicated nun with twilight healing, I couldn't help but find myself tempted to get the power for myself. However, I knew obtaining it would be difficult. So I talked with Lord Kokabeel about it, and he agreed to steal one of Azazel's sacred gear removal machines in return that I aided him in the war. I agreed, and when I brought my team to Kuo to prevent any other fallen angel to possibly stop us. I was just waiting for my moment. But I guess Lord Azazel saw through my plans, and now I'm your servant. Rainier explained before taking another sip. Issei just chuckled as he rested his head on his fist. Moving up the social ladder, huh? Not a bad plan, but poor execution. If you waited a bit longer, you would possibly have obtained the boosted gear for yourself, which despite Azazel's idea for peace, even he couldn't turn away something like that. But now you have nothing and don't have a home anymore, Issei bluntly said, making Rainier growl before she took another sip. Yeah, I guess I lost taking that risk, huh? Rainier swallowed her pride as she laid on the stone for all with a thoughtful expression. Issei thought for a moment until he got an idea. Hey, is getting more popular what you want or power? Issei asked, making Rainier confused. Power, obviously. It's just that with power you immediately get more fame. I was just tired of trying constantly, and making nearly no progression in my long life. Rainier answered, which made Issei nod. Well, I have a proposal for you. I can give you something you wanted, but even greater than you expected. But in return I want you to put a master-slave contract on yourself willingly, Issei proposed, which confused Rainier. But you're already my master. Rainier was confused as Issei shook his head. By word, but you can still betray me anytime. If you want to stay my servant but get stronger, then make the blood oath with me. If you do that, I'll give you what you wanted, Issei explained, making Rainier let out a sigh as she nodded and stood up. Fine. I wasn't planning on betraying you anyway. I have nowhere to go, she said as she created a magic circle underneath them both. Rainier sat on her knees as she looked at Issei. Pour some of your blood on the circle, Rainier instructed. Issei nodded as he summoned a knife out of nowhere, and with a bit of effort made his finger bleed. A bunch of blood drops fell on the circle as the magic circle turned black and purple for a moment, as Rainier suddenly felt unbelievable power course through her body, as she laid on the floor thrashing around and moaning in painful pleasure. What the? Issei was confused but had a faint idea what was going on. Ah, such power. Rainier kept moaning for a minute until a black magic collar appeared around her neck as Rainier's breathing returned to normal as she slowly sat up. You okay? Issei asked as Rainier nodded with a blush on her face. That power, it felt so raw and dense. It was so powerful I actually climaxed from it, she shamelessly admitted as Issei chuckled. Well, there are a lot of interesting developments. Take a look at your wings, Issei said as Rainier looked at her back, and much to her surprise her wings were out. But that wasn't the most surprising part. The most surprising part was that she now had 3 pairs of wings, which meant she had a total of 6 fallen angel wings. What happened? She asked in astonishment. Issei shrugged his shoulders as he sat down again. Must be a side effect of my blood. I told you I'm not your everyday human. But I guess it has different effects for you, Issei explained before summoning a small box. That still doesn't explain how my power multiplied by 100 times, Rainier replied as she retracted her wings. I'll tell you about it later. But here, this is what you're after. Issei threw the box at Rainier, who caught it and opened it, revealing a pair of rings Rainier is very familiar with. Is that Twilight healing? Yes and no. Well, this one is different, since it was modified and enhanced by one of my clients. So this one is much more powerful than the one the nun has, Issei answered, shocking Rainier. The rings looked exactly the same, but the main difference being the purple aura the pair in the box had. But why don't you use it? She asked as she picked the rings out of the box and looked at it with amazement. I can't obtain a sacred gear. Something to do with my soul and stuff. Anyway, try them on, Issei said, making Rainier nod, who held the rings by her chest before absorbing them into her body. After a moment, Rainier felt the sacred gears synchronize with her body as she summoned rings on her fingers. I can't believe it, she said as she looked at her rings. She looked at Issei, who tossed her his knife. Rainier caught it and gave her a good cut on her arm before raising her hand as she used her sacred gear. A purple glow shined through the rings as Rainier's cut healed instantly without leaving a trace. It is real. Duh. And now it's yours. I didn't have any plan on using them because I can't wield a sacred gear, Issei said as Rainier nodded before raising the obvious question. How can't you obtain a sacred gear? Well, humans are either born with them or obtain one later in their lives. But like this Twilight healing, The moment you take it away from someone, anybody can obtain it. Rainer explained, which made Issei nod. It's just different. Fuck it. I'll explain this once, but you're never allowed to say anything to anybody. This is an order, Issei said seriously as the magical collar around Rainer's neck glowed, which made her understand that she couldn't utter a word about this to anybody. Understand, master, Rainer said on instinct, making Issei nod. Good. I was born without any magic talent or sacred gear. I'm not a descendant of some great hero or possess some god-level talent. I'm just an average human. But one day, after an incident with a stray devil that took my parents away, I swore revenge. After meeting a certain someone, I made a deal with her. She gives me the power to fight the supernatural, and in return I'll help her in her goals. The power she gave me isn't really a power, but more a blessing with a condition. That blessing, in return of having no magical talent and sacred gear, gave me insane physical abilities and enhanced all my 5 senses and some other things. It also allows me to use legendary weapons without suffering any negative side effects. Again, what I have isn't some godly power bestowed on me, it's more of removing my limits as a human. Which meant that I had to work like hell to get this strong, Issei explained before shrugging his glass. Rainer blinked at the long explanation. It was certainly unexpected, but it did started to make sense. This string meaning. Rainer tried to pry for more information as Issei just chuckled. The strength to make the leaders of pantheons shit their pants. The strength to have killed a god and brought the strongest devil and his wife right to death's doors, Issei answered, confusing Rainer. Killing a god and defeating the strongest devil. Wait, that means you are. Rainer was about to say it, but Issei beat her to the chase. The supernatural killer, Issei finished as Rainer looked absolutely terrified, as she knew all too well about the menace to society that is the supernatural killer. Hell, when you're the first ever human across the world to receive a special rank, wanted level, which is reserved for like godlike beings, you know you're a problem. That means I'm now the servant of the most dangerous human alive, Rainer muttered to herself as Issei just laughed. Yeah, your kind's fucked. But hey, I pulled some strings and Azazel is willing to train you to become stronger. So that's a reassurance, Issei explained as Rainer just closed her eyes to calm herself down. After a minute she opened her eyes and looked back at Issei. So what now? She asked as Issei stood up and walked over to the bed. Sleep. Or you have anything else in mind? Issei asked with a small teasing voice. Rainer thought for a moment before letting out a sigh. Ah, fuck it, Rainer said to herself as she stood up and discarded her clothes before walking over to Issei and coming closer to him. Issei brought her sexy body closer to him before they started making out, as they were planning to do what people usually do when going to a love hotel. To fuck, obviously. The next morning. Yao, Issei, wake up. Issei heard the voice of Azazel calling out to him, making him groan in annoyance. 5 more minutes. Issei mumbled as he turned around to try and get more sleep. Not happening, dumbass. You are already 30 minutes late to your first day of school, Azazel informed, making Issei lift his head from his pillow and look at the fallen angel leader. Fuck, forgot about that, Issei muttered as he lifted his body up from the mattress as Rainer was still sleeping next to him with a very satisfied smile on her face. Damn. It hasn't been a full day yet, and you already blew her back out, Azazel muttered as he threw a paper bag at Issei, who looked in confusion. Your uniform. They didn't have them in your size, so I had to personally alter them to suit your big ass. Also, I already fixed a decent house near the school along with extra pairs of clothes and other things like food and drinks. The keys are in the bag as well. So now get moving and go to Kuo Academy. You will need to head to the student council first to get your schedule. The high-ranking Devil Sona Citri is the student council president. So don't do anything stupid. Now get going. I'll pick Rainer up in half an hour when you're gone, Azazel informed before teleporting away, as Issei just let out a sigh before muttering to himself. He better pay me 11 digits for this shit. Fucking going to some school with snot-nosed devils, Issei muttered to himself before putting on the uniform. Even with the altered size, the uniform still felt tight. So Issei just left the jacket open and was about to leave the room. But he turned to Rainer and wondered. Azazel will inform her about this, Issei thought to himself before leaving the Love Hotel. Exiting the Love Hotel, Issei turned to the direction of where the school was, which was easy since even from kilometers away, he could still smell the scent of devils. Smell like a bunch of cows, Issei said to himself before taking a mad dash towards the school direction, jumping from building to building so fast nobody could see what was happening. After a small minute, Issei arrived at the gate of the school. He noticed that there wasn't anything around, which made sense since he was late by half an hour or most likely an hour by now. So he entered the school gate and immediately sensed the gazes of devils watching him. Well, fuck, that was quick, Issei thought before entered the building, letting his senses guide him to the one of the devils with the highest aura. Issei brought himself to the student council office and knocked on the door. Enter. Issei heard a female voice reply as he entered the room. It was dark like he expected it to be. Devils do like to lurk in dark places. There was only one person in the room, which was Sona Citri, who sat down by her desk looking actually shocked at the behemoth that was Issei. I'm here for my schedule, Issei simply said, which brought Sona out of her shock as she nodded and gulped in fear before taking out a document from her drawer. This is your schedule. Your books will arrive later today at your house. You will be attending class 3A, which I also am a part of. So please follow me, Sona politely offered as she stood up and left the office with Issei nodding and following right behind her. Not half as bad for a devil. Short in the bust and ass department, but she has this strong determination that I like, Issei thought as he silently followed Sona to his new classroom. Issei, however, noticed that he sensed the auras of both Rias Gremory and that one girl called Akeno. Fuck, Issei cursed in his thoughts as they soon arrived at the classroom. Here is it. Please wait here for a moment. I'll inform the teacher about your arrival, Sona requested as she entered the class without knocking. After a bunch of seconds, Issei heard his name being called out. He entered the room as all eyes landed on him. Everybody looked shocked as Issei, uninterested, walked towards the only empty seat by the window and sat down. Hayate-san. It's a custom that the new student introduces himself before the class, the teacher explained as Issei looked on confused. It has been more than a decade that he went to school, so he didn't know anything how school even worked. My bad, teach, Issei said as he stood up. I'm Issei Hayate. I'm 18 years old and lived most of my life alone. I never went to a school until today, so my bad that I didn't know about certain rules and stuff, Issei casually said as he sat back down. He swore he heard the chair nearly break because of the sheer weight of his body. I see, my apologies, Hayate-san. I'll keep that in consideration. If any of you have questions for Mr. Hayate, please ask them after class, the old male teacher stated before returning to the lesson. Issei could sense the long stares of the devils that were watching him like they don't have anything better to do. Fuck my life sideways, Issei thought to himself before turning to the three, and much to his amusement, thanks to his enhanced senses, he could see a pair of girls in the far distance getting busy on the back of the school building. Shit, this might be worth it. Issei just kept himself entertained by the lesbian couple having sex in the open as the class bell rang a bit later as Issei stood up and without a word left the classroom. Not wanting to be bothered anymore, he speed-walked his way to the roof and without even considering property damage pushed the door open by force and walked on the roof. Finally, some fresh air. That shit made me nearly suffocate, Issei said to himself before turning to the door of the rooftop as he saw Sona Citri walked up on the roof and looking towards Issei with a narrowed stare. Rias just told me that you were the guy of the church yesterday. May I ask why you are here? Sona asked with a mix of respect and demanding tone. Issei just chuckled before sitting down on the floor and letting out a yawn. Business, babe. I'm getting paid to be here. Can't say more sorry, Issei answered as Sona just looked at him before nodding and walked over to him and decided to sit next to him. Issei had to give the girl respect for sitting next to him, but he could tell something was off. I see. Then I politely ask if your business resolves with us devils, she asked, making Issei shake his head. Nope. I'm here for something else. But don't stick your nose in my business, okay? I'm not here for trouble with you guys. So don't bother me with stupid shit and leave the politics out of it, Issei replied, making Sona slowly nod as she closed her eyes and wondered about something. Very well. I respect your wishes, but please keep in mind that I'm responsible for the safety of this town and its people. I won't do anything, so long you don't cause any trouble for us. But I'd like to start a friendly relationship with you to prevent hostility between us. Is that possible for you? Sona asked, making Issei surprised before nodding. Fine. So long you don't push your devil bullshit onto me. We can be cool, Issei answered as he extended his hand. Sona looked surprised for a moment before accepting the handshake. Thank you, Hayate. Sona thanked, making Issei chuckle. Call me Issei and no biggie. To be honest, you aren't half bad for a devil. And trust me, I've met a shit ton of them. Issei remarked, which made Sona actually smile as she stood up and nodded. That wasn't something I expected to hear. But thanks. But you should perhaps avoid Rias Gremory and her peerage for the moment. She very much despises you for what happened in the church yesterday. Sona warned, making Issei chuckle. Shit, I would be mad too if someone tossed my ass towards the ceiling like a rag. Issei replied, making Sona giggle out of amusement. See you around, Issei. Also don't be late to your classes. Sona warned as she left the rooftop. Issei blinked for a moment as he didn't expect to become decent acquaintances with the devil on his first day. But he didn't mind as it meant that there would be likely less drama to deal with. A moment of peace. Issei muttered as he laid down on the floor, unbothered of what was around him. However, a few minutes later, Issei felt another presence approaching him. Fuck me again, harder this time. Issei cursed his luck as the door of the room opened again as Rias fucking Gremory entered the rooftop, as Issei just kept laying on the ground trying to ignore the obvious furious girl. What are you doing here? She asked in a demanding tone. Issei kept silent as he pretended to sleep, even making fake snoring noises just to piss her off some more. Answer me, Rias demanded as her aura leaked from her body. Issei just shifted a bit before letting out a yawn. Rias' anger rose as before she could do anything stupid, Sona ran up the stairs and grabbed Rias by the shoulder. Rias, stop this at once. Sona ordered as she rose her own blue aura that seemed to match Rias, who turned around and glared at her childhood friend. But Rias was surprised that Sona glared back while raising her aura. I said stop. Your pride is getting to your head. He defeated you and you're with ease before. So what is stopping him from doing it again? Sona tried to make Rias see reason, who just clenched her teeth in anger. But why did you accept him here? Rias asked as she lowered her aura. Sona did the same but kept her strong presence to keep reminding Rias to not repeat of what happened. I wasn't aware he was the new transfer student until you told me a few moments ago. Also, I agreed to not cause any trouble, so long we don't bother him. So you should keep yourself and your peerage away from him, Sona advised while pushing back her glasses. And who is he to give us orders? Rias asked hot-headed. Issei had enough and in a split moment appeared right behind Rias, who didn't sense him. A human that can beat your ass in a second flat. I'm getting tired of your annoying voice, devil. You're lucky that I am here for another reason. But the moment you push your luck, not even your brother will be there to save your sorry bitch ass. Now leave before I make you, Issei threatened in a low voice. Despite not having any magical aura, his presence was enough to make Rias and Sona nearly shit their panties from the overwhelming presence. It reminded them of their older siblings when they rarely get serious. The presence of a king. Both girls nodded in fear as Rias hurriedly ran out of the rooftop with visible sweat falling off her face. Issei just let out a sigh before turning to Sona and scratching the back of his neck. Sorry about that. I just got tired of her bitching all the time. Please keep her away from me, Issei somewhat politely requested. Sona nodded. She fixed her composure and gave a short bow in return. Understood. However, you just threatened her, which can put you on the bad side of Lord Surzek's Lucifer, Sona said, a bit worried as nobody in their right mind would dare draw the ire of the strongest devil of all time. Issei scoffed as he looked up at the sky. Let her. I've already had an encounter with him. Nothing I can't handle, Issei reassured before walking towards the door. I'm gonna be honest. I don't like a lot of devils, but you look like one I don't mind having around me. So how about we stay in touch? Issei asked, making Sona think about it. She didn't really know what to think about this. But her devil's instincts were telling her that this human was much more than he let on. So deciding to follow her instincts for once, she nodded at him. Sure. As the school bell finally rung signaling the end of class, Issei stepped out of his classroom as he saw Sona waiting for him. Hello, Issei. Do you mind walking with me? I wish to inform you about something that might trouble you later, Sona requested as Issei just shrugged. Sure. What's going on? Issei asked. He usually wasn't so kind to devils. But Issei had a good eye on people's true character, and he could tell that she wasn't trying anything malicious, or else his instincts would have caught on to it. You see, Rias Gremory recently has been trying to obtain strong peerage members for her peerage for an enviable for her freedom. She is engaged to another high-class devil named Riser Phoenix, and apparently he is going to show up in the club room tomorrow, Sona informed, making Issei raise an eyebrow. Why, tell me. Issei asked, confused. Because I know how desperate Rias can get. She doesn't want to marry him, and knows the only way to escape her marriage is to defeat Riser in a raiding game. It is possible despite what happened yesterday. She might ask you to aid her. Sona informed, making Issei nod slowly. And why does she think I would fight for her? He asked, making Sona shrug her own shoulders. Despite her pride, Rias can get very desperate. She even asked me to lend her some of my own servants, but I refused since I don't want to force them into a situation where they most likely would get injured. Sona answered. Issei closed his eyes as he thought about something. There is another reason why you are telling me this, right? Issei asked knowingly as Sona let out a sigh. Yes. I was hoping that I might convince you to help her. You don't have to join her peerage as Rias has an incomplete set which gives her the power to call a temporary fill. Knowing how easily you dealt with her, I was wondering that you might help her for just one time. Sona said, making Issei silent as he let out a sigh. Sorry, Sona. But I don't do anything for free. If you or she wants me to fight for her, I'd better see a lot of cash and gold on the table. I don't have a heart big enough to do things out of kindness. Issei replied, making Sona muse. Sure, she was rich, but she herself couldn't really ask her own parents to pay someone for Ria's sake. Sona's parents were very strict when it came to giving Sona an allowance. It was a way to humble Sona into learning that being a high-class devil isn't all that. Something the Gremry family didn't do with Rias, who became a very spoiled girl. Of course, I'm not one to hold grudges, to be honest. I care more about money than some stupid argument. Issei's words made Sona chuckle as they neared the gate of the school. Then I will inform Rias about your offer. I'm certain she will give you the amount you want. I'll speak to you tomorrow. Have a good day, Issei. Sona said her goodbyes as she left Issei, who watched her leave. Well, shit. I'm about to get my ass in trouble again. Well, if the money is good, it doesn't matter. Issei said to himself as he walked towards the direction of his new home. When he arrived there, he senses Rainier inside. Opening the door, Issei walked inside as Rainier was wearing some casual clothes while making dinner. Hello, master. Are you hungry? She asked, making Issei nod as he walked over to the table. Just call me Issei when we aren't in the bed, okay? So how was training? Issei asked, making Rainier nod as she filled him a plate. Good. Lord Azazel was curious about my sudden boost in power and my new sacred gear. But I've kept silent about it, which he knew was because you ordered it. He started training me with advanced aura control and light manipulation. Rainier answered, making Issei nod in approval. Good. Just do that for the coming week. Nothing much will happen, so use this time to train and become more of use to me, Issei said, which Rainier nodded in return. They ate silence as Issei walked over to the couch as he laid down. Any plans for today? Rainier asked, making Issei shake his head. Not really. School isn't really for me, so I'm just wasting time. But tomorrow might be interesting. Some high-ranked devil is coming to the school and Sona wants me to help. I accept it only if they can pay me, Issei replied. Rainier looked surprised but nodded nonetheless as she walked over and laid down on top of him as both watched the TV before dozing off. The next day. As the next day arrived, Issei was walking towards the school. He saw Sona waiting by the gate of the school. Hello, Issei. I've told Rias about your decision, Sona greeted with a small smile. Issei nodded as he stopped right in front of her. So what's the deal? He asked as Sona gestured for him to follow her. Rias said she is willing to pay any amount you ask. She first suggested 10 billion Japanese yen. But if you want to be paid by some other form of currency, then you have to speak to her about it, Sona answered, making Issei nod in satisfaction. Noted, thanks. So we're heading for the club room? He asked, making Sona nod as she turned to him. Yes. Riser Phoenix will arrive shortly. Also the Queen of Surzex Lucifer is there as well. Just to let you know, Sona warned. Issei, however, couldn't help but smirk deviously. Oh really? That's good. Issei muttered to himself as Sona couldn't but shiver at the time of his voice. As they neared the club room, Sona turned to him. Unfortunately, I can't enter since it's not my business. But please inform me about what happened after you're done, Sona requested. Will do, Issei agreed as Sona walked off. Issei could tell that the Gremry peerage along with the strongest queen were already inside. Walking quietly, Issei walked past several rooms, which one being sealed off. Odd, Issei muttered to himself as he arrived at the doors of the clubroom where Rias and her peerage were. After a minute of small talk, Issei sensed someone else arriving in the clubroom. It had been a long time Riser has visited the human world. The high-ranking devil named Riser Phoenix said to himself in the third person. Jesus, it's one of those, huh? Issei thought to himself as he overheard the conversation. After a few minutes of pointless, boring banter, Issei decided to slowly enter the clubroom, seeing that the spotlight was on Rias and Riser. Nobody noticed Issei entering as he looked on with amusement as everybody had their attention on the pair. Even Grafia failed to notice Issei's presence as Issei quietly watched on. He became amused when Riser got angry and rose his fiery aura. I don't care if I have to incinerate your entire peerage. I will force you become my wife. Riser yelled as his aura flared while he created a ball of fire in his hand. But before he could do anything, his hand with the fireball was grabbed by someone that dispelled the attack and forced Riser to stumble forwards as his arm was being twisted. Enough, shitstick, Issei said calmly while twisting Riser's arm, causing him to yell in pain. Everybody was surprised. Nobody sensed or expected Issei to suddenly appear. But the one who looked the most surprised was the strongest in the room. Grafia, who looked at pale as a ghost as her eyes locked on with the young man that defeated not only her but her husband as well a few years ago. Ah, let go, you bastard, Riser demanded as Issei just gave him a look. Fine. Issei accepted as he let go of Riser's arm as he tried to stand up. But the moment he did, Issei had already kicked him in the crotch, making him fall on his knees holding his probably bleeding junk. Issei? Rias asked with hope as Issei just glanced at her before nodding. Issei then turned towards Grafia, who still looked frozen as Issei slowly walked towards her. Hey babe, how is your husband doing? Issei asked with a sadistic grin as Grafia swallowed her spit and gave him a serious look. Why are you here? She asked seriously. But everybody could see the visible sweat rolling down her forehead. Issei just chuckled before pointing at Rias. Princess over there needed someone to break off her engaged. So she hired me to fill in for the rating game. Issei answered while giving Rias a glance, who got the message. Why yes. Issei Hayata here has agreed to be a temporary fill-in since I have an incomplete peerage. Rias agreed, which made Grafia look actually flabbergasted. Lady Rias, do you know who that young man is? Grafia asked with fear in her voice. Not really. He is a new transfer student at our school yesterday. Rias answered honestly as Grafia looked like she was about to pass out. Issei, however, spoke as he looked at Riser, who still was holding onto his crotch. Don't sweat it too much. She was willing to pay for my services. So I'm here to help her out. So when is the rating game? Issei asked as he got close to Grafia, who shakily looked at him. I've to speak with the clan heads about this endeavor. Grafia replied, making Issei lean forwards and got close to her ear. Now, don't try and do something stupid. Or else someone else might become my next target. Issei threatened as Grafia felt Issei poke her stomach, which gave her the message what Issei was gesturing at. Her own son. Grafia's eyes widened with true fear showing as she took a step back. My apologies. I've misspoken. I will inform the clan heads that Rias Gremory has accepted the challenge against Riser Phoenix. Lady Rias is also allowed to use any temporary fill-in if they volunteer. I'll go back to the underworld. I'll bring Riser Phoenix with me. I'll inform Lady Rias about the specifics about the rating game later today. Have a good day, Grafia said before walking over to the still kneeling and teleported them back to hell. Issei just chuckled as he started walking back towards the door. Rias, however, stopped him. Issei. Thank you for helping me. I'm sorry for my actions earlier. If you wish to discuss anything, please don't hesitate. Rias thanked, making Issei nod as he let out a sigh. Just pay me with a shit ton of gold. Japanese yen won't get me far anyways. Issei replied before leaving as everybody looked at him with shock. Underworld. Grafia teleported back to the underworld as she arrived at the room where her husband was working. Surzex. This is an emergency. Grafia barged in the room as Surzex looked surprised as his wife never acted like this before. What happened, dear? Surzex asked as Grafia looked visibly terrified. It's him, that monster is in Japan. Grafia mumbled, but Surzex heard what she said. What monster? Surzex asked, confused. But the next thing Grafia said made the usual relaxed Devil King actually look scared for his life. The supernatural killer. 3 years ago. In the underworld, Surzex Lucifer, formerly Gremory, was rubbing the side of his head as he just received a very concerning message. A clan head of the 72 Pillar Devils has just been assassinated. This was concerning news, as all the clan heads were heavily protected by very powerful barriers that could give a Satan-class individual a hard time breaking through. This caused a mayhem within the nobility, as with the limited information that they have, Xerxes couldn't puzzle of who it possibly could be. While he was thinking to himself, Graphia walked over and gave her husband a cup of coffee. "My lord, do you wish for me to personally track this individual? We haven't found any spores of who IR could be, but we did trace some demonic energy residuals of Lord Agar's that pointed that the culprit is currently still in the underworld." Graphia offered, as while many didn't know this, but Graphia is an excellent hunter with the talent of tracking others. Xerxes gave a short nod. "Sure, dear. But be careful. For someone to sneak into the barriers placed around the territory and castle of Lord Agar's, it means we are facing with a dangerous opponents." Xerxes accepted as Graphia nodded in return. "Very well. I'll departure this instant, my lord," Graphia said as she left the office, leaving Xerxes alone deep in his thoughts. "I've a bad feeling about this," he thought to himself as he hoped his wife and queen wouldn't end up in danger or possibly death. With Graphia, it didn't take the Queen of Annihilation a long time to track down the aura of the deceased Lord Agar's. After a while, Graphia arrived at an old building in the middle of a ruined territory. She wore a more battle-suited attire. "This is where the trail ends," Graphia said to herself as she slowly approached the old home. She peeked through the window as she saw a young man, who looked to be in his late teens, nearly 20 years old. Graphia narrowed her eyes as the young man slowly woke up and turned his head from the couch to her. Graphia was surprised as she perfectly hid her aura and presence. Quickly jumping to action, Graphia froze the entire building in a matter of a second. "That should keep." Graphia was cut off when the ice broke as a blur dashed towards her and grabbed her by her shirt and dragged her a good block away before letting go, which made her roll on the ground for a few meters. Graphia quickly stood up as she turned to the young man, who looked at her with a raised eyebrow. Well, what do I own this pleasure, strongest queen?" Issei asked curiously as Graphia stoned her features. "Are you the one who assassinated Lord Agar's?" Graphia demanded, making Issei chuckle. "So that is why you're here? Well, what if I did, devil? What are you gonna do?" Issei asked as Graphia immediately went into action. "Then die," Graphia replied as she summoned a giant ice spike out of the ground right under Issei, who effortlessly jumped off the spike and did a small flip. "Don't be in such a rush to die," Issei muttered before dashing right at Graphia, who didn't see it coming despite looking right at him, as Issei punched her right in the face, which sent her back flying. Such brute force, Graphia thought, worried as she quickly crashed herself before turning to Issei and firing a beam of ice at him. Issei just grinned as he looked at the beam before summoning a black sword out of nowhere and slicing the beam in half, causing it to go two separate directions. "Not bad," Issei complimented before dashing at Graphia again, who summoned a ton of ice spikes at all directions to disrupt Issei's path. Issei, however, wasn't phased as he tore through the ice spikes with his sword before closing the distance with Graphia, who looked surprised as Issei sliced her across the chest. Graphia watched as blood gushed out of her chest, but she wasn't defeated as she used this chance to grab Issei's wrist and froze his arm along with his sword. "Annoying," Issei muttered to himself as he headbutted Graphia, which made her lose her grip on his wrist, which gave Issei the chance to kick her in the gut, which sent her back. Using the opening, Issei shattered the ice around his arm and sword with brute force before turning back to Graphia, who rose back up from the ground. Graphia glared at him before raising her aura to the max before covering her fists in ice and charging at him. Issei narrowed his gaze before swinging his sword vertically, which Graphia dodged, but she didn't expect the sword to touch the ground and cause a shock wave that forced her in the air. Issei took this chance to grab Graphia from the back by the waist before jumping in the air and coming right down and delivering a powerful German suplex that made a crater with Graphia unconscious within it. Rising up, Issei grabbed the unconscious devil by her hair. Reaching for his sword, Issei was about to decapitate her but was stopped when Issei was forced to dodge a small sphere of destructive energy. Landing a bit away, Issei turned to the source and saw the strongest devil, Xerxes Lucifer, standing with his destructive aura around him. Crouching down to his wife, Xerxes poured a dose of phoenix tears and healed his nearly beaten to death wife. "Ow, how romantic," Issei taunted while resting his sword on his shoulder while looking down at Xerxes, who glared hatefully at him. "You dare attack my wife?" Xerxes asked with his aura rising each moment. He teleported his wife away before turning his full attention to the young man in front of him. "She was the one that attacked me first, dumbass," Issei replied before letting out a sigh before giving a savage grin. But I'll do you worse compared what I did to her. Issei roared before dashing at him. Surzex was surprised by his speed but narrowly dodged a slash at his neck, but did receive a small cut on it. The Devil King immediately released a giant wave of destructive energy that destroyed the nearby buildings. But Issei managed to dodge last second before jumping around Surzex at such a speed that even he couldn't keep up with his eyes. So fast. Surzex thought before deciding to release another wave of destructive energy that eliminated any spot that Issei could jump or hide in. The entire field was flat as Surzex looked around but didn't find any trace of Issei. However, before Surzex could come up with another idea, he sensed something approaching as he turned around and saw Issei closing in with a different sword than before as Surzex released an other orb of destructive energy but was shocked when the sword sliced through the orb like nothing, which caused it to explode. Surzex was blinded by the explosion, which gave Issei the opening to summon a third different sword that carried the holy element. He used it to pierce him straight through the gut. Arf. Surzex let out a massive scream of pain as he felt the holy element making his body burn from the inside out. Stomping his foot on his head to silence him, Issei pulled the sword out before storing it away. How disappointing, Issei said to himself before turning around and walking away. Killing you right now will cause me more trouble down the line. Take this as a lesson, you arrogant shitface. With that, Issei was about to leave, but when he took a couple of steps he sensed something off and turned around as a massive shock wave erupted, which sended Issei a bit back. Issei looked in front of him and saw Surzex floating in the air with his aura flaring to the highest. His body wasn't visible anymore, as what Issei could make out that it was the power of destruction in human shape. You will end here. Surzex's voice sounded demonic as he turned to Issei before firing a beam of destructive energy that Issei was forced to dodge. A giant explosion erupted behind him as Issei glanced behind him before giving a small whistle. Not half bad. But still, it won't be enough to defeat me, Issei declared before taking out his holy sword and blitzing him again. However, the moment Issei's sword came into contact with Surzex's aura, Issei couldn't contact his sword as the aura was repelling him back. You're finished. Surzex roared before creating a small sphere and bringing at Issei, who felt that it was dangerous, and quickly jumped back to dodge it. Quickly thinking, Issei summoned a small dagger-like weapon and stabbed the sphere that was heading its way. This caused the sphere to dissipate, which shocked Surzex. He cancelled my ruin the extinct. Impossible. Surzex thought, baffled as Issei just chuckled. Time to bring out the big guns, Issei stated before taking out a black chain and connecting one of the ends with the dagger. I can't come close or else I'll risk getting destroyed. So long distance it is. Issei swung the chain dagger, as the chain magically kept increasing in length as it was heading Surzex, who planned to block with his power of destruction but was shocked that his attack suddenly dissipated the moment it came in contact with the dagger. Using all of his strength, he barely dodged the attack, but he was quick to dodge it again as the chain dagger came down again another time. However, what Surzex didn't realize that Issei was grinning the whole time as he held on to the chain. Gotcha, bitch, Issei yelled as he tugged the chain as the chain that were surrounding Surzex quickly wrapped around his body. Surzex's eyes widened as the chains were capable of withstanding his aura of destruction as Surzex was suspended. Taking this chance, Issei dashed at him while unattaching the dagger with the chain and bringing it towards his chest and pushing it inside. Surzex's true form deactivated as his eyes widened in horror. What? Surzex could barely get that out as Issei tore the dagger through his chest, creating a large cut on it before bringing it down and stabbing him in both thighs a couple of times. Lastly, Issei pulled out his dagger before changing it with a small butter knife and stabbing him in the forehead. Letting out a sigh, Issei pulled away his chain and storing them again before looking at the downed Devil King. Even with all that power and abnormal talent, you were killed by a monkey like me, Issei said before looking down at him before doing the ultimate disrespect. Pulling down his pants a bit, Issei let out a relieved sigh before taking a big piss onto Surzex's barely living body. After a minute, Issei was done, and Issei tucked his junk away before grinning like maniac. This is your lucky day. As much as I want to kill you, I really don't want to deal with the backlash of having to deal with the entire Devil faction. So here. Issei tossed a vial of phoenix tears that landed on his body and shattered. Looking satisfied, Issei left the area with the biggest grin he ever wore. Issei's POV. After kicking Riser in the balls, Issei went on with his day as he received later a message from Sona that the raiding will take place tomorrow. Issei was confused why so soon, but he felt like Grafia had something to do with that. He knew she would inform Surzex about his arrival in Kuo, so most likely there is a lot of tension between the Devil Kings. But Issei didn't care. The faster it happened, the faster he was done with it. So going through his day like nothing happened. Issei arrived back home but felt a new aura signature in his house. Well, if it isn't my favorite pussy. Issei called out to the woman who was laying on the couch with her legs dangling of the side. Said woman gave a sultry smile as she sat up and looked at Issei seductively. "Hi there, handsome Naya." The black-haired cat girl addressed him, which made Issei chuckle as he walked over to her and kissed her on the lips. "Hi there, Kuroka. What brings you here?" Issei asked as he sat down next to her on the couch. Kuroka wasted no time and rested her head on Issei's muscular legs as she let out a comfortable sigh. "I came here to ask you for a favor, Naya." Kuroka began as Issei realized something. "For you to ask me a favor, even risking to be caught by the devils, means this favor must be important." Issei realized, making Kuroka nod as she rolled on her back so she looked Issei in the face. "I've heard from Valley that my sister Master." Kuroka stopped as her voice was filled with venom. But she stopped as she continued. "Rias Gremery is engaged to Riser Phoenix and challenged him to a raiding game. I don't care what happened to that princess, but my sister. If Rias becomes Riser's wife, that means Shiren becomes Riser's servant too, which means he most likely will take advantage of her." Issei finished Kuroka's explanation as the black cat nodded with obvious anger on her face. "I want nothing more to kill him. But doing it myself will land me in more trouble than I am now. Also, I'm not certain how to get to Riser before the engagement happens." Kuroka explained as Issei nodded. "Well, you don't have to worry. Kool-Aid Princess has already paid me to fight for her. So I'll handle Riser so your sister won't be his slave," Issei assured, which surprised Kuroka, who couldn't help but smile widely at him. "For real?" she asked. Issei just nodded with a wide grin as he held her by her waist. "But if you want me to kill Riser, I require some compensation," Issei whispered huskily as Kuroka shuddered but held her ground. "But won't be killing him make you an even bigger target?" she asked as she wrapped her arms around his neck. Issei just kissed her on the lips before crawling on top of her. "I don't care if I'm their target or not. I'll kill them all if they try something," Issei replied before making out with the cat devil, who passionately accepted Issei's advances. "Well, let's just say that Kuroka won't be returning to Valley for the night." The next day arrived as Issei was waiting in the Occult Research Club to finally begin the raiding game. None of the devils tried to talk to him, which he was glad for. Issei was busy playing a game on his phone as the rest were by Ria's side strategizing. Eventually Grafia arrived as she immediately turned to Issei with a hint of uneasiness. But she kept her composure and turned to the devils. "Lady Rias, it's time for the raiding game. Please enter this circle." Grafia pointed out to the white magic circle as everybody walked towards it. Issei let out a groan before forcing himself off the couch and lazily walking over to the circle before being teleported. Issei zoned out as someone over the broadcast explained the rules of the raiding game. After a minute it finally stopped as Issei let out a sign before walking out the door. Issei-san, where are you going?" Rias asked, confused and afraid as Issei just glanced back at her. "I'm heading straight to Riser. No way I'm playing this shit like an actual chessboard. Just stay here and wait for the announcement that you've won. Don't do anything stupid," Issei ordered as he left the building. Everybody looked confused as Issei just pretty much told them to stay put. "Should we stay here, Rias?" Akeno asked, worried. Rias shook her head as she turned to her peerage. "We can't let him do everything. We need to prove that we are capable on our own," Rias delusionally stated as her peerage followed her orders. With Issei. As Issei left the building, he wasted no time and dashed towards Riser's base and noticed most of the girls have already left. Not hesitating in the slightest, Issei burst through the wall, and in a split moment grabbed Riser by the neck and dragged him out of the school building before throwing him on the empty field. Issei stopped a few meters away of him as he grinned at the Phoenix Devil. "Well, that was easier than I thought," Issei mused as he sensed Riser's peerage running towards his direction. Riser, who stood back up, glared at him. "You lowly human. What are you thinking to do?" Riser yelled, making Issei roll his eyes. "To beat your ass, dumb fuckface," Issei replied, bored. Riser fumed at him as he blasted a wave of fire at Issei, who casually sidestepped the attack. While the wave of fire passed him, Issei pulled out a cigarette and lit it with the fire of the attack before taking a deep inhale and releasing it. "What?" Riser asked, bewildered as his peerage arrived to support him. Lord Riser. His queen with the big tits arrived next to him as Issei just looked bored while smoking his cigarette before doing something unexpected. Bang. Wayubaluna. The sound of a gunshot sounded through the entire field as Riser's face splashed with blood as his queen's body dropped dead on the floor with a bullet right in her skull. Riser Phoenix's queen eliminated. Damn headshot. Issei gave an evil smile as Riser slowly turned to him with pure rage appearing on his face. Die, you bastard. Riser roared in pure rage as he unleashed a massive blast of fire at Issei, who just grinned with the cigarette in his mouth as he dodged the attack. Issei dusted off the fire that touched his clothes as he grinned towards him. Sorry, but these are quite expensive. Even now I stole them. So I can't risk you destroying them. Issei apologized before turning back to Riser. Now time to finish this. Issei vanished in a blink of an eye before the sound of punches and kicks that were being delivered as Riser turned towards his peerage that were being pieced up one by one as everybody except for Ravel was being knocked unconscious. Riser Phoenix's 8 pawns, 2 rooks, 2 knights, 1 bishop retired, the voice announced as Riser looked at his defeated peerage with despair. Issei, who had grabbed Ravel by her neck and lifted her up in the air, looked at Riser with a feral grin. Last on the menu, the Phoenix brats. Which one to kill first? Issei asked them as he looked both Phoenix children who were scared for their lives. Commentator booth. What on earth is happening? Lord Phoenix yelled at the screen as his wife looked on with worry. Next to them were both Zeoticus and Venelana Gremory watched the rating game, which happened to be broadcasted to the entire underworld. I don't know. I didn't realize that Rias had such a strong individual agreeing to fight for her. Zeoticus replied as he was confused on what was happening. His wife Venelana looked equally confused, but since she was against the marriage in the first place, she hoped that this Issei would win against Riser. In another room were also 3 of the 4 Devil Kings as they also observed the onslaught. So he is the supernatural killer, huh? Ajuka asked, making Surzex nod his head. Seraphal watched the fight with the most interest as she wasn't particularly afraid of him despite knowing what he did to the strongest devil alive. He does look cool. Seraphal casually added, making Surzex deadpan at the magical girl. So what's our plan of action? Surzex asked, making Ajuka shake his head. Do nothing but observe. He isn't after us or the rulers of Kuo. So someone else in Kuo must be his target. If we intervene, we might draw out his ire and he'll target us. Ajuka replied as Surzex closed his eyes and nodded. You're right. But I don't feel comfortable with that monster being so close to Rias and Sona. Surzex said as he clenched his hands into fist. Seraphal noticed this and couldn't help but mentally smirk. To have the strongest devil being so scared, you certainly are a special human, Issei Hayadu. Seraphal thought as she watched the screen with great interest. Back with Issei. Issei looked in between the siblings before staring down Ravel with a wolf-like grin. For a devil, you aren't half bad. But I wonder, should I kill both of you or just one? Issei asked, making Ravel panic. Please don't kill me. I'll do anything. Ravel begged as Issei looked even more amused. Anything? He asked as Ravel desperately nodded as she was losing air. Fine. We'll speak about the details later. But now don't do anything and after this fight. Find Sona Citri. If you don't come, I'll kill you and your family. Issei nonchalantly threatened as Ravel nodded as Issei let her go, allowing her to breathe again as she fell on her knees with tears. Issei walked over to Riser, who looked visibly afraid. Now let's finish this devil. Issei announced as Riser somewhat got his confidence back as he tried to swing at Issei with a fire-enhanced punch. But Issei caught it before punching Riser right in the face, which broke his nose as he stumbled back. But Issei wasn't done as he delivered another punch in Riser's gut before giving him a good book on the side of his head that made him see stars while dropping on his knees. Issei just grinned as he lifted Riser up by his hair before grabbed his head and kneeing him right in the chin that cracked his skull. Riser let out a painful howl as Issei threw his body across the field a few meters away. As Issei walked over to Riser, he sensed Gremory and her peerage arrived at the scene and were looking shocked and surprised. Issei ignored them as he stood next to the barely conscious Riser, who grabbed onto Issei's leg. Issei just stepped on his hand before looking at Riser with a bored look. That's all the mighty Phoenix clan has to offer. Such a disappointment. Issei said loud enough so everybody of the broadcast could hear it. Issei looked at the downed Riser as he kneeled a bit. You still alive down there? Issei asked as Riser barely got a word out. Mercy. Riser begged as Issei just laughed at him before standing back up and stationing himself next to Riser's body. Issei gave the most evil grin he could muster as he pulled his pants down a bit before pissing all over Riser's face. Everybody that saw this looked in shock as Issei was humiliating Riser in front of the entire underworld for everybody to see. However, that wasn't even the best part yet, as Riser suddenly let out a shrieking scream as his body suddenly started burning up as smoke appeared from his body. Hell, what is this? Riser yelled in agony as his body was burning up at such an alarming rate. Issei, who was just done, tucked his little buddy back in his pants before grinning down at him. Well, before the match I have been drinking a lot of holy water. I was curious if the holy element still is present after you drink it. And it appears that it is true. Also, the holy element in the water that I drank is much more pure than in regular holy water bottles. So I guess you'll die from holy piss. Issei revealed as Riser could only scream in pure pain as his body started breaking down before being burned completely. Riser Phoenix eliminated. Rias Gremory wins the rating game. The voice announced, but nobody cheered as they all were too stunned at what just happened. The only one who wasn't stunned was Issei, who just grinned at nobody in particular. That's it, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Now, let's get into the next story. What if Issei was the son of the legendary demon hunter Dante? Let us begin. Abandoned church. It was a clear night in a small town called Kuo. A half moon was on the night sky that was filled with stars of every imaginable size. The people of this small town were slowly preparing to go to sleep or somewhere already in the lands of the dreams, dreaming about extraordinary wishes that they wanted or something else. Though while most of Kuo was preparing or was already in bed, on the small hilltop that was dominating the surroundings was a small, abandoned church. And in that little place, a huge battle was currently underway. A battle that was going to change everyone's lives forever. Even after you've boosted up, you are still a fucking weakling, ha ha ha. A mature voice echoed as a laugh was heard all through the church as the two figures faced each other in a battle to the death. The mature voice belonged to an unraveled beauty that had long dark hair that went all the way down to the lower back, while her normally beautiful and gentle face was distorted into a hideous, ugly and smug setup, with her prominent feature being her purple eyes that shined with absolute malice and disgust towards her opponent that she impaled trough legs. Her body was that of a supermodel with huge racks that on a first look someone thought they were fake. Her well-toned and perfect stomach along with her long legs made her look like a real porn star girl. And her outfit was only adding to that look, as it was all in straps that only barely cover her sacred parts. But even with that, it was extremely hard for male, or even female, to keep her eyes on her deep purple color eyes, as her huge boobs would jump up and down with even the littlest of movements. Even her breathing in the air was complemented with her bouncing front. Her rear was like it was made by the best artist in sculpturing. It was made to look at a firm, but as she demonstrated a few times, was very elastic. All in all, she was the definition of otherworldly beauty, which was proven by a pair of wings black feather that were coming out of her back, almost giving her the angel look, but it was clear that if she was at any point a real angel had fallen. Opposite of her was a young teen that had brown, almost chocolate color hair that was tied in a small ponytail and chocolate color eyes. He was dressed in a school uniform, and to the average eyes, he looked perfectly normal. Well, normal as someone can be, with a red gauntlet that looked like a dragon claw for an arm and a pair of black leather wings that spurred from the teen's back. Though this where the two opponents would clash for the last time. Well, that was what she thought as she readied her new light spear that was lush purple in color just like her eyes. Well, it was a blast, but you bore me, go to hell, and stay there, you worthless human filth. The mature fallen angel spoke, her tone sipping over the edge of beyond cruelty and malice, but before she could deliver the final blow to her enemy, it was already too late. Ah! The stabbed teen shouted his war cry as soon as he saw her spear and charged at her with fury, ignoring the hellish pain that was coursing through his body. His adrenaline at an all-time high, his rage at its peak, and the overwhelming power that his gear has supplied him was the cherry on top for him to neutralize the distance separating them in almost a blink of a time. Huh! You filth, let go of me. The fallen shrieked in disgust as she swung her spear a few times trying to free herself, only to her horror to see her spear getting destroyed by a well-placed hit from an armored claw. Only for her to quickly flap her wings trying to force him to let go of her as she lifted off the ground. You are mine, you bitch. Take this. The teen roared in like a dragon as he swung his armored hand once more. The connection was made and the fallen coughed and gasped as she was hit. The hit was so strong that she felt like she was hit by a tank, and not by a filthy human. and to add to her fury she was flung outside of a church through the wall that fell on top of her, making her lose fainted. Fucking bitch. The teen muttered in exhaustion as his legs give way, his adrenaline and power up wearing off, making him cringe as he saw the floor welcoming his face to a painful landing. Though before he could be more intimate with the cold stone floor, his body was stopped with a pair of arms around his torso keeping him up. And it did not take much for a teen to know who saved him from his date with Stone. "You are a bit late, Casanova," spoke in a tone that was mixed with anger and exhaustion. Hee. Well, President said not to interfere, so I stood back and observed. The voice of a male was heard, making the brown-haired teen groan before something came to his attention, but he quickly put it aside. "Well, Issei, I must say you really did a number on her. And you are a devil for just a week or so. Your growth is astonishing." The male that supported the teen spoke again with admiration in his tone. "It sounds to me that she..." Issei spoke again, but he bit his tongue as he saw the rest of his group entering the room where the battle was held. The group that entered consisted of 3 girls. The first one was a beautiful girl around the late teens with long crimson-red hair that was slowly wavering in the calm breeze that was made by the hole in the wall. Her baby blue eyes and her lush lips were tempting, but her biggest feature was her assets, mostly her huge bust that was easily her best feature. And with how they moved freely, it was easy to figure that she did not wear a bra under her school uniform that she wore along with black shoes. That girl was Rias Gremery, a high-class devil that was also a leader of the group. Well, it would be more correct to say master, but we will leave it at that for a moment. She was followed by a busted black-haired teen with violet-color eyes, her age that was in beauty and assets her match easily. Hell, even having a bit larger breast than Rias herself, which was as unbelievable as it sounded. But she did possess a larger rack, which she proudly showed it. She was dressed in Japanese priest style of clothes. Though he knew better than to trust her smile, as he quickly learned that she was both SM, and that both scared and excited him. The girl was also Ria's second in command, so it stands to believe that she was immensely powerful as well as beautiful. The name of that Miko beauty is Akeno Himejima. Though the last was a small, flat as board girl with short white bobcat hair and golden, almost cat-like eyes. Her outfit was the same as Issei's and Rias, as in school she was someone Issei would admit was the most honest with her thought of him, and he was grateful for that at least. Though that didn't mean that he liked her or vice versa, it was more, he was afraid of her and her monstrous strength that she possessed, even if she was younger and shorter than him by a lot. The little pint-sized bulldozer, as Issei named her in his mind, was Koneko Tojo. And for the boy from before that saved Issei from his love affair with the ground is Kibayuto. He is a short-haired blonde boy with bluish-gray color eyes. He was like the rest, dressed in a male version of school uniform while having a sword strapped to his hip that was in its shelter. And what crept Issei was the smile that Kiba had on his face. It was, well, in Issei's opinion, gayish. "Well, I am extremely impressed with my adorable pawn. You managed to defeat an opponent that had more battle experience and power. You are truly a unique catch," Rias said with a huge smile on her face as she saw that her pawn was alive and even managed to beat the fallen angel that was beyond doubt stronger than him. Though she could clearly see that her piece did not get away without a scratch, but that was to be expected. "Yufufu, Issei, you are truly a monster. Yufufu, I wonder, are you a monster in other areas?" Akeno questioned as she licked her lips in a sexual way that Issei felt his boner rise in an instant, though it quickly went down when he heard moaning in Koneko's emotionless voice. "Here she is, President," the midget said in her emotionless tone that made Issei really think that she was half machine. But he put that aside to focus on a fallen that was ceremonially thrown towards them. "Very nice work, Koneko. And of course you as well, Issei. I was having only a bit of doubt in your power, but it looks like it was misplaced," the redhead said in a regal tone that showed her superiority. Though that tone also worked something inside Issei that he was not 100% sure why, but he ignores it for now. "Thanks, President. But fuck me, those light spears hurt like a bitch." Issei cringed as the pain again assaulted his body, making him bite his nose so as not to let a scream, which made Akeno lick her lips as a small blush came over her beautiful face. Though even with that, everyone present could clearly see his pain, but they put it aside for now as they needed to get rid of a little crow firstly. It was making Issei slowly start question things that happened. He was not as stupid as some would think, he was just lazy to think sometimes, but seeing how everyone was more focused on a damn crow than their injured teammate, it set an alarm in his head. "Akeno, be a dear and wake up our sleeping guests," Rias calmly said, making the black-haired priestess smile. At once, Akeno replied, and before Issei could blink, a huge torrent of water hit the fallen woman, making her shriek from the sudden coldness. "Oh, you are finally awake, I see," Rias commented as she walked slowly towards the now awakened fallen, who looked around to see what was happening only to quickly realize that she was surrounded by devils. "Well, introductions are in order. I'm Rias Gremory, the heiress of the Gremory clan, and these are my adorable servants. You already know my pawn, the others are my queen Akeno, rook Koneko, and the knight Kiba. Not that was necessary because you are not going to live for long, Rainier. Yes, I know your name well." Rias continued to talk as she pointed to everyone present, shocking the already shocked Rainier more. "Gremory, you think you won just because you're here with your servants. There are other fallen angels here with me. They will soon come to hell." Rainier spoke with a bit of fury to try and hide her fear, though it didn't last long. "They won't come to help you, because my queen and I finished them off before coming here. I think you can recognize these feathers. You fallen can see the difference in them from who they are, can't you?" Rias stopped Rainier in mid-sentence, making her gasp at what she saw. Terror overtook Rainier as she saw feathers of her fallen comrades and allies Calawerner, Danasek, and Middlet in the hands of crimson-haired Princess of Destruction. Now she knew that she was all alone, and the damage she took from the pervert was too much for her to even move, let alone fight. So, when muscles won't win, she started to rack her brain for a way out. "You want to know why you lost to this boy, fallen angel Rainier?" asked Rias as she looks in the purple eyes of the shaking Rainier. "The answer to that is amazingly simple. His sacred gear is not a twice critical. It's the booster gear, the gauntlet of the Red Dragon of Domination, aka the Red Dragon Emperor," explained Rias with a proud and smug look on her face as Rainier stared at her before her eyes turned to Issei in pure disbelief. What? You are saying that the legendary gear is in this dork and perv?" Rainier for the life of her could not imagine how and why. Though then was something that clicked in her mind, a crucial piece of information that she knew was a lifesaver. "So that is the reason." Rainier slowly spoke before she started to chuckle a bit at how this devil's operation was planned. Which she needed to give them credit, it was very well planned. "You said something, fallen?" Issei questioned in a bit harsher tone than he intended, as he was fed up with this whole ordeal and just wanted to go home and sleep. "Yeah, cough, I do. Tell me," Issei did it, cough, "ever cross your mind how did you become devil?" Rainier spoke between coughs as her lungs were no doubt pierced by her rib cage that was a present from Issei to her. Though that question started something in his mind. How did he become a devil? He was sure as hell that he was not superstitious or that he believed in good. Well, technically he did, though since he is Japanese he is of a different religion, but that was beside the point. "What do you mean?" Issei questioned, not noticing the others flinch at the question that Rainier asked. "Well, cough, how come did that red-haired bitch, cough, knew you were with me and you are dead?" The black-haired fallen angel asked with a vicious smirk on her face as Issei's eyes widened in surprise at first before his brain registered what Rainier asked. And that made his surprised eyes to narrow so much that it looked as if he closed them, though what Rainier saw made her pale more than the thought of death at the hands of the red-haired teen. While Rias and others gasped at what they heard and moved to finish off Rainier, they were in shock when they felt Issei's power suddenly erupted in a maelstrom of crimson, red, and black vortex. Everybody was pushed back several meters as gravity became much denser as their bodies were glued to the ground. The floor underneath them started cracking as the walls and roof of the church started to collapse. They all looked at the source of unimaginable power as their eyes watched a deep crimson red swirling with black around Issei, harmonizing in perfect unison. The crimson gauntlet around his left hand started vibrating with him, as even the dragonic power within the sacred treasure was being overpowered by the sheer demonic aura erupting within Issei. They all witnessed something horrifying as Issei's body slowly transformed, becoming an embodiment of a nightmare that realized the word demon. His skin was a dark gray and black with red scales covering his flesh. His eyes glowing a demonic crimson as horns grew out of his head, while two wings of crimson-colored energy emerged behind him as a tail also came out of his lower back. All could only stare in fear as nobody dared to move. Rainier, who thought she might pull a last resort by exposing Rias' malicious plan, has turned against her as Issei was looking right at her like a predator looking down at its prey, ready to devour her. Issei took one step, causing the floor to burst into more cracks as Issei slowly made his way to Rainier, who was too weak to even crawl away. Her body was frozen under the immense pressure as Issei grasped her neck with one hand, raising her in the air. Issei stared her down like a cornered animal as his crimson eyes looked at her fearful ones, who were shaking as she couldn't keep her body in shock as she soiled herself out of despair of the demon that stood in front of her. All the devils waited in anticipation of Issei was about to do, but were surprised when he suddenly let go of her, making her fall into her own puddle of urine on the ground. Rainier didn't have time to look up as Issei swung his tail and smacked her hard against the head, which knocked her out cold. Rias. Issei's demonic voice echoed through the nearly destroyed church as Issei slowly turned around and glared the devils with his demonic eyes. Kiba, despite being absolutely horrified, tried to materialize a demonic sword through his sacred gear, but the moment he drew his sword to take a stance, he was punched right in the face by Issei, which sent him flying across the church through a wall, which knocked him out. The rest of the Gremory family snapped out of their state of fear as Koneko tried to come closer to punch him, but was too slow as Issei grabbed her arm before her punch could hit him and swung her around and sent her flying through the broken window where he sent Rainier before. With only the king and the queen left, Issei turned his gaze at the sadistic who flew up and gathered some lighting magic and fired it at Issei. Bad boy. Akeno gleefully watched as Issei was hit with her lighting, but was surprised as he kept standing and shrugged off her attack like it was nothing. Issei just growled in annoyance and flew at Akeno with incredible speed before snatching her mid-air and crashing her through the wall. Akeno. Rias called out to her queen as Issei flew up with Akeno in his hand before lifting her up high in the air. Looking at her terrified face that was sporting a blush, Issei let out a roar before diving straight down into the roof of the church and holding Akeno straight down, so she crashed right through the roof and hit the ground of the church with a powerful crater. Rias looked on in shock as her peerage was literally being manhandled as Issei slowly emerged from the crater, looking Rias straight into the eyes. Rias. His voice muttered ominously as his aura slowly rose again. Anger began to brew as Issei dashed at her with a roar, but before he could reach her, a sudden blue light came from the sky and intercepted as in a moment an other demonic-looking figure with blue wings stopped Issei in his attack. Rias was knocked back and has fallen unconscious from the sudden force of power as the blue aura demon gazed at Issei's. Before Issei could do anything, however, the intruder suddenly forced Issei's demonic form to revert back to his human form, as Issei's eyes was still a deep red as his hair has changed in a pale white as Issei looked at the demon with shock and confusion before being pushed back hard against the wall, which knocked him out as his body slumped on the floor. The demon stood up as he looked around before glowing and revealing a handsome young man with short white hair and sharp silver eyes. Well, this is surely interesting, the man muttered before walking up to Issei and picking him up. Still can't believe Dante had a child all this time. Well, better clean this up before they get the wrong idea. Issei's eyes slowly widened as he found himself in a realm filled with nothing but pitch blackness. His eyes stared at the endless ceiling above him as the memories of what transpired before he fell unconscious replayed in his head. His teeth clenched as his hands balled into fists. Issei tried to sit up, but his body felt too weak. He felt cold in this empty place, but a sudden wave of intense heat underneath shot upwards, engulfing the entire darkness in pure orange-red fire that created a majestic tornado of flame around him. Issei's eyes could only look up as within the tornado of fire a gigantic scarlet-colored western dragon materialized. The dragon let out a mighty roar before his features became more clear. He was very scaly with red spikes coming from his body along with bright emerald green eyes. The dragon's vertical slit eyes narrowed at Issei, who could only look back in fear as the dragon slowly levitated at his level before peering down at Issei. So you are my current host, never had a demon-human hybrid before. The dragon mused with interest as Issei looked surprised. Wait, you are the Red Dragon Emperor. The dragon inside of my sacred gear. Issei realized, making Drake give a slow nod as he spreaded his wings with pride. Yes, I am. My name is Drake, the Welsh dragon and the heavenly dragon of domination. I am one of the 2 dragon emperors. Drake introduced himself with pride as Issei couldn't help but gaze in amazement. He was always a big fan of dragon when he was a kid, and to this day he still found dragons cool and badass. You probably know me. I am Issei Hayato. But where are we? Issei asks as Drake sat down and relaxed himself next to his host. We are in a mindscape. It is a subconscious realm that connects your soul and mind to the sacred gear. Think about the breach that connects us together. I'll explain more in detail later. Your body is about to wake up, but I'll speak to you again when you wake up. Your cousin will help you further first in learning your true identity. Drake announced as Issei's vision glowed white as before he could say anything his body woke up as Issei found himself on a bench somewhere in a park. Issei groaned as his body felt very sore. It took a lot of him to sit up as he looked around and realized that he was in the park where Rainier had killed him the first time they went on their date. What the? Issei was about to say but was cut off when his body moved on purpose as a white-haired man came out of the shadow of the tree. Finally awake. Took you a bit, the man said as he walked up to Issei before dismissing your worries. Relax. I am not here to hurt you. I rescued you actually. If you killed the Gremry princess you would have been killed by the devil faction and her older brother. The man revealed, surprising Issei. You stopped me. Issei asks, not remembering what exactly happened but did remember the blue-colored demon before he passed out. But it was some blue-skinned white-haired demon that stopped me. The man just smirked at Issei's comment as he took a step back before transforming into his demonic form, surprising Issei before he turned back into his human appearance. The name is Nero Sparda. And I'll be blunt and direct, Issei. I am your cousin. Your dad is my dad's younger twin brother. Nero revealed, shocking Issei, who looked at the man named Nero as he was insane. What? That can't be. My dad never mentioned of having a brother. Issei countered, making Nero shake his head, and was about to explain, but before Nero could say something Drake's voice spoke from within the sacred gear. He isn't lying, partner. You are indeed related by blood. Your father and his father are twins, as I have met both of them and their father before, and your demonic energy signature and Nero's are related indeed. Drake confirmed, making Issei even more confused. What you mean, Drake? Issei asked, but Nero answered this time. That is the father you grew up with, isn't your biological father. Your real father's name is Dante Sparda and mine father was named Virgil Sparda. They are both sons of the legendary Dark Knight Sparda, who was a pure demon of the underworld. Nero explained, making Issei even more shocked before a small memory came back to him of his old childhood friend telling him about Sparda. A demonic knight that protected humankind from his own race and king. A demon that is worshipped by humans as a god. Sparda, that name, I remember it now. My friend that went to England years ago told me about the Dark Knight. Issei recalled vaguely, making Nero nod. Sounds like him. Despite being a demon, Sparda is very respected by members of the church and heaven. They even worship him to this day, and you and I are his last grandsons and last remaining descendants. Nero said as he sat down next to Issei, who was still progressing things. He needed to talk things out with his mother and father, but he was slowly started to believe what his cousin was saying to him. But wait now to reveal yourself. Issei asks, making Nero shrug. Last request of your old man before he kicked the bucket. He told me about you and where you lived. He asked me to let you live a normal life for a while until you were old enough or when you awakened your demonic powers. The latter happened, so I came as fast as I could from America to stop you from killing all those people around you. Nero explained. Issei nodded as he looked up as a full moon was looking down at him. What now? Issei asks, making Nero raise an eyebrow. Haven't given much to it myself, honestly. But now I can clearly see that you need some training, as you are currently a walking giant target for any supernatural faction. So I'll bring you to where I live to train you myself. Nero declared, making Issei's eyes widen. Really? He asks, making Nero nod. Yes, we'll leave tomorrow morning. So tonight go see your parents and talk things out. You deserve to know their side of the story. I'll deal with the political drama that will follow you. Nero casually answered, making Issei nod as he suddenly remembered something. Where is Asia? Issei asks, making Nero raise an eyebrow. Asia? Who's that? Nero asks, confused. My friend. She is blonde-haired girl that died by Rainier. She was in the church when you arrived. Issei explained, getting a confused shake of the head from Nero. Sorry, kid. But didn't see any blonde girl in the church when I collected the bodies of the devils. Are you sure it was a girl? I did see a blonde boy there. Nero asks, making Issei shake his head. No. Asia is a girl and she was dead in the church. Issei replied, making Nero shake his head. Then her body must have vaporized the moment your aura went out of control. If she was dead, she couldn't protect herself from the density of your aura. Hell, I sensed you all the way from America. That would tell you how strong your aura was. Nero suggested, getting an uncertain nod from Issei, who didn't believe what he was saying was right, but he didn't have any argument to disprove him. Yeah, you're probably right. Issei muttered as he started walking towards his home. Nero saw this and decided to shed some light on Issei. Hey, you should look out for tomorrow and the days that will come. When you come back after we're done. These devils wouldn't think again to mess with you. Nero loudly proclaimed, making Issei feel some form of happiness, knowing that he will get stronger when he is done training with his cousin. Yeah, you're right. See you tomorrow, Nero. Issei said loud enough that Nero could hear him as he walked away, leaving Nero alone in the park, who stood up and turned to the tree. So what you think of him, Azazel? Nero asks, making a second person emerge from the shadow as the leader of the fallen angels. Azazel looked on with interest. How ironic that he is the Red Dragon Emperor, since you were the White Dragon Emperor before you lost the divine dividing. Azazel said out loud, getting a snarl from Nero. You know damn well why that happened. Nero countered, annoyed, making Azazel wave him off. No need to bite my ass about it, deadweight. We should be glad that he has the potential to grow stronger than even Dante or Virgil now that he had the boosted gear. Still, I am concerned that what this being was that even you three couldn't take down. You really think Issei can handle it? Azazel asks, making Nero nod confidently. Trust me. If Dante said that the kid has the potential to be stronger than even him and Virgil combined, I can't help but believe him. But I need your help getting him there. So set up a base in Red Grave City where we can train him properly. I'll handle the demonic side of him, but I'll need your help with his sacred gear. Nero requested, getting a lazy shrug from Azazel. Will do. I'm bored of sitting in my office all day anyway. Azazel accepted before teleported away. Nero let out a sigh before summoning his devil wings and flying away to find Sona Citri. With Issei. Issei arrived home eventually. It was still dark, but the lights of his home were still on. He knew his parents were still awake as they often watched some movies going to bed. So entering his home, Issei walked inside of the living room, which caught both Mickey and Gora's attention. They both also immediately noticed that their son's hair was now a snowy white and his eyes a bright red. Ah, son. There you are. We were starting to get worried that you were up to no good. I must say I like the new fashion style, Gora said jokingly, making Issei nod as he took a deep breath before turning to his mother. Mom, I need to speak with you about something important, Issei said, making his mother look up from her husband's side where she was leaning on and turned to her son. Yes, dear. What is it? She asked, slightly concerned. She never saw her son this conflicted, and it made her feel anxious for some reason. Do you know a man by the name of Dante? Issei asked, shocking both his parents, who both nearly jumped from out of the couch. What? Mickey yelled, shocked, as Gora grabbed his son by the shoulders. How do you know that name, son? Gora demanded, making Issei look away before answering. I met someone who claims to be Dante's nephew and told me that I am his son. I wanted to confirm it with you, Issei replied, making Mickey look horrible as she was afraid of what to say next. Gora looked horrified as well before taking a deep breath and fixing his composure. Fuck. I didn't want to say this to you this early, but I guess you already found out. Gora cursed as he turned to wife with a nod. It's time we tell him, sweetie, Gora said softly, making Mickey look at him doubtfully before nodding and walking away to get something from the attic. Dad? Issei asked, making Gora mention to the table as Issei and him sat down. After a minute, Mickey came back downstairs with a couple of things. A letter, a picture frame, and a sword bag. Mickey placed all three items on the table as dust flew off them, making Issei cough. Mickey wiped away the dust from the picture frame as he handed it to Issei. Issei looked at the frame for a moment, as it was a picture with him as a just-born baby and his parents together. But what grabbed Issei's attention was the white-haired man next to the couple, smiling as well. Is that? Issei was about to ask, but Mickey answered for him. That is your biological father, Issei. The legendary demon hunter Dante. Mickey answered. Issei stared at the picture of his biological father in silence. The man had long white hair just reaching his shoulders and looked like he was in his late 30s. He looked around the same age as Goro, if not older. Issei couldn't help but let out a small chuckle as he already saw some resemblance between him and his father. Looking up, he turned to his mother, who still looked conflicted about the whole ordeal. Mom, what happened? Issei asked, making Mickey look at her son for a moment before looking down at her hands. Long ago, when you weren't born, your father and I tried to have a baby before but failed twice. It was hard, as for some reason I wasn't able to produce a healthy baby for some reason. You probably didn't know it, but Goro is a retired exorcist from the church in England, and he and I fell in love in one of his mission. He saved me from a demon, and I am still in love with him ever since. After we failed to have a second child, Goro went to a bar to drink his miseries away. While there, by pure chance, met Dante and told him what's going on. Dante felt sympathetic towards Goro and stayed with him the entire night and brought him home safely. When I met him, Dante and I talked a bit. He was very kind and friendly and surprised us when he offered to make a deal with us. Mickey began explaining, which Issei listened intently to as Goro took over. Dante wanted to leave Air behind as he went on a job that would cost his life. He said that he would impregnate Mickey and allow us to take care of his son after he is gone. We both agreed to it, and he was there when you were born. Mickey named you, but Dante was the first person to actually hold you. Goro further explained, making Issei look at his mom with surprise. Our dream was to have a son. Even knowing that our sweet boy is a portion demon, it doesn't stop us from loving you, Issei. I'm sorry we had to keep this away from you. But neither we or Dante wishes to thrust you in the harsh life of the supernatural world. Mickey apologized as Issei stood up and walked over to her and embraced her in a hug. No need to apologize, Mom. I'm thankful to have been raised by such loving parents. That goes also for you, Dad. Even if you aren't my biological father, you are my true dad that not even Dante can replace. Issei muttered softly, making Goro started tearing up as the family hugged it out for a moment. After hugging each other, they all sat down as Issei looked over at the letter and the sword bag. Grabbing the sword bag, Issei looked at his parents confused. Did Dante leave this behind? Issei asked, making Mickey, who was drying her tears, nod. Yes, a young man named Nero dropped this off and told us that Dante died. He said that Dante wanted to give you this for your first birthday present. Mickey answered as Issei slowly undid the bag, showing a beautiful katana with a white hilt and a skull-like handle. Issei gazed at the sword with awe for a moment before slowly pulling the sword out of the scabbard, revealing a chipped backside and a silver with red blade. Issei couldn't help but marvel at the blade as he could feel a strong connection between him and the katana. Very cool looking sword, son. I can sense a very strong demonic aura from the sword. Stronger than any holy sword I ever seen, that's for sure. Goro muttered in astonishment as he inspected the sword closely. From his exorcist days he has seen many holy swords and wielded a powerful one back in the day. But none of these holy swords came close to the power that was in the sword in his son's hands. Yeah. Issei muttered as he put the sword back in the sheath before placing it back on the table. Next he reached for the letter and undid the seal. It looked somewhat old and rusty, like these typical 80s typed letters. Issei took out a piece of paper and saw a poorly written message which he assumes that his father wrote. Hey kid. If you read this, that means you parents have told the truth about me. Sorry that I couldn't have been there. I didn't want to be like my brother, your Uncle Virgil, and leave my kid for someone else to raise, but I didn't have a choice. Listen, I can't tell you everything that happens because that would place too much stress on your shoulders. But I would advise you to find your cousin Nero. He knows of you and can help you further. Also, if they are still around, look for 2 women named Lady, yes, that's her name. Don't ask why, and Trish, a blonde demon. Both of them are 2 of the strongest women in the world and can help you a lot in your adventure. I have left behind a sword that I made using my own sword Rebellion and my brother's sword Yamato. I have an other sword called Sparda, which is named after your grandfather Sparda. You will have to find it yourself. You need all 3 swords to fight the opponent you'll come to face sooner or later. A word of advice I have for you is, no matter the hardships that you face, your family will have your back no matter what dark truths you will face and mysteries you will uncover. I named it Revelation. It's a shame I didn't have the chance to meet you how you are now. Perhaps in the future there is a chance. But for now it's up to you and Nero to take care of mine and Virgil's problems. I wish you the greatest of luck in your adventure, your amazing father Dante. Jackpot. Issei smiled weakly as tears slowly drooled down from his face. He slowly folded the paper neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Mickey and Goro watched as Issei placed the letter back on the table and turned to them. I'm at a loss for words. But now I need to say something to you. Issei began, making Mickey smile. You are going with your cousin to train, aren't you? Dante said that when you found out that you need to train. So we understand that you will be gone. Mickey finished for him, making Issei nod. Goro smiled as he let out a small sigh. Just promise to be careful. You might be Dante's son, but there are very powerful beings out there and many enemies that wishes to kill Dante and Sparda because of what they have done. So stay vigilant and try and learn as much as you can from your cousin. Goro advised, making his son nod. I'll go tomorrow to America. I'm not sure how long I will be gone. Issei informed, making both his parents nod as they both understood what he was saying. No worries, son. We'll be fine, Goro reassured, as he stood up. Let's call it a night. You'll need all the rest before you head off, Goro suggested, making his wife nod. Yeah, let's go sleep now. Mickey agreed as all hiatus went to bed for the night. It was a long night, and all could use a good night's sleep. With Nero. Nero arrived at the school building where Sona Citri was still at. It was the middle of the night, but Sona for some reason was still in the school. Sneaking his way inside and arriving at the student council, he knocked on the door of the student council as Sona opened the door in confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked, making Nero nod. Sona didn't seem to recognize him at first. "Hello, Sona Citri. I need to urgently talk with you, Sister Seraphal Leviathan. It is very urgent, and it regards Rias Gremory and her latest peerage member Issei Hayato," Nero requested, or more ordered, making Sona confused. "May I know your name, sir?" she asked respectfully. Nero Sparda," Nero answered, shocking Sona, who immediately went to call her older sister. After a small minute, Sona hung up the magical call as soon a blue magic circle appeared as Seraphal Leviathan in a magical girl uniform appeared. "Sona, why are you calling me so urgently?" Seraphal asked with a sing-sang voice before turning towards Nero before her eyes widened in shock. "Nero." Immediately Seraphal changed her attire to a more appropriate one of a dark green business suit. "Hi Sarah. Long time no see. Sorry to cut things short, but we need to talk about something important." Nero greeted her before explaining everything what happened in the church and about Issei's unique heritage and what Rias had done. Seraphal looked horrified before donning a serious look. "Do you have any proof of all these accusations?" Seraphal asked seriously, making Nero nod. "Yeah, the fallen angel who has the Twilight healing hostage. I'll give her for you for interrogation. You can also ask the other peerage members of Rias. However, they would probably lie to save her ass," Nero answered, making Seraphal nod. "Hand over the fallen angel. I'll have her interrogated. I wish speak with Issei Sparda as well. I understand that he wants to leave to train, so I'll write in that he is under momentary leave. Will be a month enough to train him?" Seraphal asks, making Nero muse. "A month might be a bit short, but I'll do my best to train him as much as I can." "But what about the fallen?" Nero asks, making Seraphal muse. "We will keep her prisoner and let her fate be decided by Issei himself. However, things might be difficult with Rias, as revealing this to her family without concrete evidence will be difficult, especially with her older brother Serzex," Seraphal answered. Nero nodded as he stood up. "I'll tell him about what happened. But will you deal with Rias thou? She probably will call her brother or something," Nero asks, making Seraphal nod. "She is momentarily unconscious like you said. When she wakes up I'll have a good chat with her. Don't worry about it," Seraphal assured, making Nero nod as he opened the window and was about to leave. "Good. I'll tell Issei about what happens. But you and your sister keep this conversation between us," Nero stated before jumping out of the window and flying away. Seraphal looked at the window before turning to her little sister. "You keep quiet about this, sis." "Right," Seraphal asks, making Sona nod. She was surprised of how her older sister handled the sudden meeting with Nero, but promised to keep her mouth quiet nonetheless. "Of course, Lady Leviathan," Sona agreed. The next morning, Issei woke up from his sleep as he quickly made a small bag with some spare clothes. He went downstairs and saw his parents readying some food and snacks for him. His mother smiled at him before handing the big bag of food at him. "Here. This will last for 2 weeks for sure," Mickey stated as Goro walked in with none other than Nero. "Ready, sport?" Goro asked, making Issei nod as he turned to Nero. Nero looked at the sword before whistling. "Nice to see that sword again. I'll teach you how to use it in no time. Now say your goodbyes so we leave. I have a month to train you before you must come back here. I've made some agreements with the Devil King, so you will be fine," Nero informed, making Issei nod as he turned to say his goodbyes at his family before taking his sword and bag of food and heading outside with Nero. "So how are we going to America?" Issei asks, making Nero grin. "Flying, duh. You have wings, so we are going to use them." Nero then summoned his blue demonic wings before taking to the air. Issei wasn't sure how to use his own wings, but Drake was there to help. "Close your eyes and concentrate. Focus deep within your own body. You will sense a power inside you and try to pull it out. Then imagine it as a pair of wings and then pour your focus in bringing it out," Drake instructed, making Issei follow his instruction as he closed his eyes and focused. After a small moment, Issei felt 2 wings of crimson red energy spurt out of his back. He, like Nero, slowly took off in the air, as Issei slowly started to get the hang of it and took off to the sky. The journey of the son of Dante is just about to begin. After a long flight that took several hours, Issei and Nero finally arrived at Red Grave City. When they landed, Issei fell onto the ground panting harshly as he still wasn't used to using his wings and flying, as the speed that Nero was going was like keeping up with a jockey when you haven't jogged in your entire life. Nero gave a grin as he helped Issei back up. First thing with training and building up stamina. You can't hold out a fight when you become out of breath so fast. But you did well keeping up. Your body is getting used to your demonic power awakening. Nero complimented before looking ahead, where several disgusting demons started emerging from the ground looking for any human to devour. Issei looked in slight shock at the horrifying demons that looked like it would appear in a horror game, and summoned his boosted gear and pulled out his sword revelation. Nero nodded in approval at the quick thinking of his cousin and decided to guide him some more. These are low-tier demons, so one good swing will do the job. Your sword is a perfect mate for them, and even the tougher ones. Go and kill them. Don't worry, I have your back. Nero assured as he pulled his gun Blue Rose and shot a flying demon out of the air. Issei nodded before taking a deep breath and lunging at the demons while using his sacred gear. He didn't know why, but he felt his blood pumping and heart beating faster the moment his eyes narrowed dangerously at the demon. Boost. Feeling the power surge through his body, Issei with more force than he expected sliced straight through one of the demons, making it disappear in red smoke. Blood splattered all over him, making Issei momentarily shocked at the brutality, but the voice of another demon coming closer snapped him out, making block a feral strike aimed at his face. Issei's bloodlust returned as he pushed the demon back and with surprising accuracy sliced the head of the demon's body. Nero watching in surprise as Issei handled himself well for his first day. Kid got talent for sure. He is also cold-blooded like my dad when he fights. Nero mused as he saw the resemblance of Dante and Virgil in Issei. Let's crank this up then. Nero thought before grinning as he pulled out his own sword Red Queen and dashed at surprisingly Issei, who saw this and blocked his strike but was pushed back several meters. Issei looked up in shock before glaring. The fuck, Nero? Why attack me? Issei yelled, making Nero grin as he aimed his gun at Issei and shot a bullet at him. Issei, reacting on pure instinct, blocked the bullet with his sword, slicing it in two. You're doing surprisingly well, so I decided to take off the baby wheels and go straight into real training. We only have a month to train you, so I'm making sure you're ready. Nero exclaimed before charging at him, making Issei return the favor as Nero pushed him back and fired several shots at him, making Issei block them, but one hit him in the arm, but Issei just growled in annoyance as he with incredible speed rushed Nero and tried to slice him across the chest, but Nero predicted this and leaned backwards before kicking him back and closing the distance immediately while impaling his sword in Issei's stomach. Issei coughed up some blood but used this chance to drive his own sword in Nero's torso, which caught him off guard, and pull his sword back and create some distance. Issei started breathing harshly, but his wounds were starting to heal as he stood back up. His sword was still in Nero's chest, making him growl at the mistake of letting go of his sword. Nero pulled Issei's sword out of his chest and chuckled at him. Rookie mistake, kid. That can cost you your life. Nero lectured, but Issei just smirks as he charged at Nero head-on, making him confused as Nero tried to slash him with Issei's own sword but was surprised that Issei ducked and cocked his left fist. Boost. Explosion. With stored power, Issei dived his fist straight into Nero's groin, making the demon hunter go white as he dropped both of the swords and fell to the ground unconscious. Issei laughed as he picked up his sword and held it by Nero's neck. Jackpot, deadweight. Score 1 for Issei. Issei declared with a grin before his body felt something off as he turned to a hill of rubble as he saw a man with black and blonde hair sitting calmly while watching the show with amusement. Knocking out Nero with one punch is no easy feat, congrats. The man applauded as he stepped up from the rubble and walked over to him. He saw that Issei was cautious and held out his sword in anticipation, but the man waved him off. No need to worry, I'm a friend of his. The name is Azazel, leader of the fallen angels. Issei's eyes widened immediately as he recognized the name that Rainier spoke when she obtained the twilight healing from Asia. Why are you here? Issei asks as his anger started to rise. Azazel got slightly tense at having the bloodlust of the son of Dante aimed at him, but he raised his arms in defense as he bowed his head. I'm a friend of Nero. Also, I wish to apologize for what my subordinates did. I know I can't bring back the dead, but I wish to repay you for my own incompetence. Azazel offered, sincerely surprising Issei as Nero slowly got up with a loud groan. Fucking hell, really? Nero asks as he looked at Azazel, surprising him for a moment before realizing what happened and decided to let Issei's low blows slide for now. He stood back up and walked over to him. Kid, I called for Azazel because you need his help with your sacred gear. Trust me, he is the guy with all the info and research that anybody who has a sacred gear needs to learn how to properly master. Nero advised, making Issei slowly lower his sword and let out a heated breath. Fine. I'm just not satisfied of what happened to Asia. But you are going to help me with my sacred gear? Issei asks, making Azazel look up and nod positively. Exactly. While Nero handles your demonic and sword training, I will help you learn how to use the boosted gear and help attain the balance breaker. Azazel stated, making Issei confused. Balance breaker? He asks, making Azazel blink a few times before realizing. This will take a while. He mumbled before unfolding his wings and taking to the sky. I will come back later with everything that you need. But now focus on your training, see ya. Azazel then flew away, leaving the two SPARDAs behind. Hey Issei. Nero called out to him, making him turn around to face him. Yes. Bam. Issei's eyes widened as Nero had kicked him in the groin with a giant grin on his face. Karma is a bitch. Don't forget that. Nero said, making Issei fall onto the ground, coughing painfully as even the dragon sealed within him felt the pain of that kick. Issei was sure that even Drake was knocked unconscious with that one. After 10 minutes, Issei slowly stood back up again as he proceeded to train with Nero for the rest of the day, as the night slowly came as more demons appeared for the two demon hunters to go after. With Rias Gremory slowly awoke from her sleep after she was knocked unconscious by Nero's arrival. While she was oblivious of what happened after, she did remember clearly of what happened to her peerage as her anger rose as she stood up from the bed that was in the medical bay in the school. She was about to contact her older brother, but an icy cold voice stopped her. I advise you not to call your brother Gremory, or else you will be digging the hole deeper than you have already. Rias turned around as she saw Sona's older sister, Devil King Seraphal Leviathan, sit on a stool in her dark green business suit, who seemed to be waiting patiently. Lady Leviathan? Rias asked, confused before taking a bow. What happened? She asked, confused, making Seraphal let out a sigh as she stood up as her cold gaze froze Rias where she stood. What happened? Shouldn't I be the one to ask you of what happened? You don't have to, since I already have my answers before you woke up, and let me tell you. You are on very thin ice, Rias Gremory. Your actions regarding the Red Dragon Emperor last night has revealed to be that you aren't better than the man you are engaged to. You really think allowing an innocent man to be killed by his love interest, and then later coming in to force him into your service without him having a say of the matter, knowing full well you could have taken another approach, is a good way to gain a servant? Seraphal asked seriously, with her voice making the entire room freezing cold to the point that Rias' breath can be seen. Aye. Rias tried to formulate a response, but Seraphal wasn't having it. Silence. You are in no position to talk. I'll be direct and say that your days are numbered. Issei Hayato has left Japan for a month with my approval, with a good friend of mine. It is possible he may find a way to release the evil pieces in his body, and leaves your peerage for good. And you have no authority in this matter. We have already collected evidence that you are indeed responsible for what happened. So you better keep your mouth shut, or else I will leak the information personally to the Gremory family and the other devil clans. That would certainly destroy the reputation of what the Gremory clan is known for. Seraphal threatened, making Rias' eyes widen. What? You can't do that. Rias yelled, but that proven to be a mistake as Seraphal's eyes narrowed, and in a moment Rias fell onto the ground, breath desperately, but her body was in so much pain. You're a fool, Rias. I can kill you in an instant, and even Surzex knows that my actions are justified. Don't forget the Red Dragon Emperor is a much bigger player in the supernatural world than some spoiled devil princess. I'm making sure that don't lose him to another faction. Seraphal informed before placing her foot on Rias' face and glaring at her menacingly. Why? What makes Issei so important other than being the Red Dragon Emperor? Rias asked painfully as Seraphal drove her feet slightly harder in her skull. You will learn soon enough. But for now I order you and your peerage to stay silent about everything. You are also in no position to take any form of action in your town until I say so. Don't try and talk things over with Sona. I will know immediately, and you will be punished even worse than Rainer. Seraphal stated before lifting her foot from Rias' head and walked back a bit. Rias slowly was able to sit up as she sat on her knees with her eyes tearing up from the pain. I understand, my lady. Rias submitted as she knew that she was cornered as she bowed her head in shame. Good. Hope you enjoy your last peaceful days in the human world, Rias. Because soon they will be your last. Seraphal muttered ominously as she teleported away, leaving a seething Rias behind, who swore that she will have her revenge one way or the other. It has been a few days since Issei started his training with his cousin Nero. To say Issei had it rough was a major understatement. Issei was put into life-or-death situations every hour of the day, and even in the middle of the night. Thankfully, his awakened demon powers granted him inhumane stamina and the ability to stay awake in the night without tiring out. Which without it, he was certain he would have blacked out a few times already. Issei had faced a ton of different kind of demons, from simple night crawlers to what Issei referred to. What in Satan's draft is that? Issei had learned to use the power of his sword, which granted him the ability to cut through nearly every demon like a hot knife through butter. But he also started to grasp how to use the enhanced speed that the sword provided. But of course, Issei was still learning and ended up face first diving into a demon's mouth like an amateur. When not using the enhanced speed of his revelation, Issei started to get a good hold of the boosted gear, which combined with the sheer power of his sword, pretty much makes it feel like he speeds running through those lower level demons like getting a high-ranking weapon in a video game, and one-shotting small fries. Now, Issei, who was bathed in blood of demons, was facing off the largest fish of the city who had taken over the area. Nero was relaxing with a can of beer as he watched Issei handle the demon on his own. The white-haired demon hunter couldn't help but smirk. Kid made more progress in 3 days than what most devils do in decades, Nero said to himself before letting out a burp. The sound of a demon letting out a painful cry, as Issei pushed his katana into the demon's skull and pushed it deeper, before pulling it out and jumping back with a graceful backflip. The demon let out a pathetic cry as his body disintegrated, leaving nothing but demon corpse behind. Issei sighed as he wiped the blood of his forehead before dodging the crushed can that Nero threw at him. "Hey, watch the head," Issei yelled at his cousin, who just smirked as he stood up and flexed his arm a bit. "Looks like you're getting the hang of it pretty well. Think you can handle something stronger?" Nero asked as he walked over to Issei, who wore a plain red shirt with a black coat over it that happened to resemble Nero's father Virgil's coat. But Issei had some red dragon's design of the side which Azazel had made for him, since Issei needed some durable magic clothes that didn't tear after a few fights. "What you mean? I thought that blockhead was the strongest demon here," Issei replied as he pushed his hair back a bit. Nero just shrugged as he pointed at the sky, revealing a giant figure flying towards him. "Demon, yes. But he isn't a demon. Good luck," Nero said before he ducked, as Issei had barely time to register him being taken by a large golden-colored dragon who snatched him from the ground before dragging his body through a building, making Issei dizzy for a moment as the dragon tossed his body to another building. As Issei was about to crash into the building, he managed to snap himself out of his confusion and manifested his wings and fly all the way on the top of the building. Issei landed on the floor and raised his hand as he eyed the golden dragon that managed to fly without even having wings. As the dragon let out a loud roar as it flew towards him, Issei's sword, who he let go off when he was snatched off the ground, flew towards him, and Issei caught it before jumping off the building towards the dragon, who tried to attack him with his mouth, but Issei managed to pierce his katana into the dragon's skin, making the dragon carry Issei through the air as the hybrid summoned his boosted gear before charging up. Boost. Transfer. Issei transferred the power to his sword as Issei pushed his revelation through the insanely hard scales of the dragon and managed to cut it, which the dragon reacted by trashing Issei while in the air. "Suck on this," Issei yelled before raising his arm and pushing the dragon with his boosted gear, which was strong enough to send the dragon hurtling away while Issei flew off his body with his sword in his hand. Issei manifested his wings again and flew to another rooftop and watched as the dragon regained its balance as Issei took a stance. Boost. The dragon turned his head to Issei and unleashed a powerful fire breath, which Issei narrowly dodged by jumping high in the air. The dragon was about to aim his fire breath towards Issei, but the Red Dragon Emperor let out a grin as he raised his sword, and when the fire breath was about to reach him, Issei sliced the fire breath with an air blade that traveled all the way to the dragon, who was hit straight to the face, who roared in irritation. Issei clutched his sword and was about to charge at the dragon, but he was caught off guard as suddenly a golden-colored area shot from the dragon's body, making Issei attempt to block it, but he was blasted back with so much force he crashed through several buildings and landed into a smaller one with his head spinning. "Fuck, that was bad," Issei muttered as he looked up as the dragon was about to fire another fire breath. Issei was about to jump back into the air, but he felt something off. The moment the dragon launched his attack, a shit ton of golden-colored weapons shot straight out of his mouth right towards Issei, whose eyes widened as he quickly summoned Revelation and created a bunch of energy swords to create a wall to protect himself as the rain of weapons started bombarding his defense, as Issei groaned out in annoyance. "Hey Drake. Who the hell is this guy?" Issei exclaimed while pushing himself to prevent his makeshift wall from collapsing. Someone I believed to have died centuries ago. This doesn't make sense. I'll explain later, if you manage to survive. Drake replied, making Issei roll his eyes at the dry response. Really funny. How the fuck do I beat him? Issei demanded as his barrier started to break as Issei gritted his teeth. No clue if I'm being honest. I can only advise running for your life. Drake answered with honestly as Issei wanted to slap the dragon that was sealed in his sacred gear. Well, if you don't have a solution, then I simply have to make one. Issei released his barrier right before he jumped to the side, dodging a shit ton of weapons that would have made him look like a hedgehog. Issei ducked behind a half-destroyed wall and picked up a sword that the dragon had fired from its mouth that was pierced into the ground. A holy sword. Shit, maybe this can help. Issei muttered to himself as he grabbed the sword with his sacred gear hand and took a deep breath. Boost. Transfer. Issei took a stance, and right when the dragon was about to unleash another attack, Issei stepped from behind the wall and launched the sword. Rest in peace, Kobe. The sword flew at insane speed towards the dragon, who barely saw it coming as the sword pierced straight into his right eye, making him trash in the air in pain as Issei quickly followed up by jumping up with his revelation in hand. Fuck off. Issei yelled as he closed the distance between him and the dragon as the golden western dragon turned his head as Issei was now flying above him with a ton of energy stored in his sword. Issei brought his sword down as the ton of stored demonic energy shot down at the dragon, making him cover himself with a golden aura, causing a massive explosion to occur in the city, destroying a good ton of building with it as the dragon was pushed back to the ground. As the smoke cleared as Issei landed on the ground, his eyes widened as the dragon looked relatively unharmed as he pulled the sword out of his eye before looking back at Issei with what Issei could describe, a massive grin. Not bad, host of Drake. You did better than I expected. The dragon started speaking, which surprised Issei. Wait, you can talk? Issei asked, surprised as the dragon just nodded before his body glowed a bright golden light. The light died down, revealing a tall blonde tan-skinned man with purple-colored eyes. Wahahaha, of course I can talk. But that is beside the point. You passed the test. The dragon that is now in its human form informed Issei, who blinked a few times and pushed his hair back, thinking that he might have a concussion, as why a dragon that just attacked him like that was telling him that he passed the test. Test? What test? Issei asked, still not truly convinced, as the dragon before him just laughed loudly before turning to the side where Nero and Azazel were by a rock, looking at Issei with an amused smile on their faces. Pay up, Zaz. Told you he would last longer than a minute. Nero exclaimed as Azazel cursed something under his breath as he pulled out a small bag that barely could fit in a few coins at Nero, who happily tucked it in his pocket. Guess I really underestimated him. Azazel muttered before standing up and walking over to Issei. Issei, this is Fafnir. He is one of the current Dragon Kings. Nero told me that you were improving way faster than he expected. So, he and I made a bet that you could last a minute against Fafnir. Guess he wasn't lying. Azazel informed as Fafnir walked over to Azazel. Yeah, the little kid got some real power even without balance breaker. Anyway, you got what I want? Fafnir asked, making Azazel nod as he pulled out what looks to be some king of cloth from his pocket. Today is not my lucky day. Lost 2 deals in a row. Azazel muttered before shaking his head. Anyway, Issei, Fafnir over here will help you with your dragon training and hopefully awaken your balance breaker within the time we have training you. Azazel explained, making Issei shake his head in confusion. Let me get this straight. You and my cousin had a bet that I could last a minute with a literal Dragon King, and now that Dragon King is going to train me? Issei asked, still not certain of all that was happening around him. The three just looked at him and nodded. That's pretty much the gist. Only a dragon can train another dragon. And besides, both of you are perverts. I think you two will get along with each other splendidly. Azazel answered, which Fafnir gave a loud laugh in return before he had his arm around Issei's shoulders. Damn, he's fast. Issei thought as he barely registered Fafnir so close to him. He is certainly more open from the last time I've seen him. Drake informed Issei, mentally making the white-haired red dragon emperor sigh. Why was he surrounded by so many oddballs? Guess you will help me with my sacred gear, huh? Issei asked, making the Dragon King turn his head towards him and grinned widely. Indeed I will. You're the second person I'm going to train. Funny that before you, I happened to train Yuri. Fafnir was suddenly cut off when Azazel gave a chop on his head. Too much info, you airhead dragon. Now I suggest you two along with Nero head towards the private underworld training area that I've prepared for a bunch of hormonal dragons that want to let loose. So go and train until your heart's content," Azazel said as Fafnir nodded before turning back to his dragon form and grabbing Issei with his clawed hand. "Looks like this might be a good training trip for me as well. But what was that about?" Nero asked with a hint of suspicion in his voice as he narrowed his eyes at Azazel, who just shrugged his shoulders. "You two will find out soon enough. But don't go after my neck when you do find out. I'm just doing my job," Azazel replied before teleporting away, leaving the trio behind. "Stupid crow," Nero muttered as he jumped onto Fafnir's back as the dragon took off with Issei struggling to free himself. "Hey, I didn't agree to this," Issei yelled as he along with Fafnir and Nero took the air with speed that would make a missile cry as the trio headed for the underworld to continue Issei's training. Loud explosions rose from the artificial battle area that Azazel had prepared for the training of the Red Dragon Emperor. Azazel watched from his office as the artificial forest was turned into a wasteland as grandson of Sparda and the Dragon King Fafnir were going at each other neck to neck. Kids getting stronger and stronger with each battle. But no sign of his balance breaker coming. Odd. Azazel muttered to himself as he bit into a chocolate bar as Issei, who was now in his devil trigger form, was able to fight against Fafnir, who was going almost full power, as the hybrid dealt a powerful punch to Fafnir's head which sent the dragon to the ground in a large crater. Azazel's eyes shifted to the side as a dark blue magic circle appeared as Seraphal Leviathan appeared in her usual business suit. "Hello, Lady Seraphal. How are you doing this fine afternoon?" Azazel asked, making Seraphal turn to him before giving a small smile. "I've been better. I've been making sure that Rias Gremory doesn't do anything reckless, and I got more information of the fallen angel named Rainer. She confessed that she is aiding Kokobel in restarting the war by collecting sacred gears for his forces," Seraphal informed as Azazel's facial expression turned sour. "Had a feeling they were linked. Well, looks like we don't have to worry too much. I believe can handle my old friend by himself," Azazel replied, making Seraphal raise an eyebrow. "I know he is a Sparda. But from being a hybrid who didn't have access to his powers to reaching a leader-class angel in 1 month. Sounds impossible," Seraphal said as she knew Issei had the potential to become insanely powerful. Even more powerful than Surzex. But to be already a leader class in less than a month? That just sounded so absurd. "You don't believe me? Have a look." Azazel gestured to his screen as it showed Issei and Fafnir duking it out again in the sky, with Issei matching Fafnir's speed in the air as the hybrid and dragon looked like they were having the time of their lives. Seraphal and Azazel watched the battle for a few minutes before Seraphal stood back up. "I see, then the training was quite a success. But I wish to see the power of Issei hide for myself," Seraphal said, making Azazel raise an eyebrow himself. "You wish to spar with him?" Azazel asked, making Seraphal nod as the fallen angel leader shrugged his shoulder. "Fine by me. But I don't know how he will react to you, seeing that he isn't very fond of devils," Azazel warned, making Seraphal smile. "Don't worry. I'll have this handled. I'll help heal Issei from what Rias has done to him," Seraphal assured as Azazel prepared the next part of Issei's training to commence. Later, as Issei was laying on the ground panting loudly after a few hour-long sparring sessions with both Fafnir and Nero, Issei was resting by the campfire which he learned to build to learn to survive on his own. As Issei was half asleep relaxing with the heat of the campfire, his eyes slightly widened as he felt the hair of his neck stand up as he sat up and turned around to see a young girl a little bit older than him sitting on a stone. "Hello there," the young woman greeted, making Issei narrow his eyes as his senses told him that this woman was extremely powerful. "You're a devil?" Issei asked the immediate question as he summoned his revelation and was ready to strike the woman who raised her arms in defense. Wait. Let me explain myself first. I'm Seraphal Leviathan, the current Devil King Leviathan and one of the current rulers of the underworld," Seraphal introduced herself. However, Issei didn't lower his sword and merely narrowed his eyes more. "Devil King? Great," Issei said out loud, making Seraphal sigh as she lowered her arms. "Listen, I know what has happened with Rias Gremory and the fallen angel Rainer, and I wish to talk about them with you in a professional manner," Seraphal added as Issei looked at her without moving a muscle. "I don't care if you came to apologize on their behalf. Leave me alone," Issei warned as his aura leaked out of his body. Sure, he was physically getting stronger, but he still hasn't fully healed of the double betrayal in such a short time. The only reason why Issei even remotely trusts Azazel is through Nero, and even then, Issei doesn't trust a fallen angel leader a lot apart from looking over his training. But he has no reason to trust a devil after what Rias has done, let alone a devil king at that. Seraphale's face became neutral as she took a deep breath. I know what Rias Gremory had done is unforgivable. Seraphale began but was stopped when Issei blindsided her and brought his katana to her neck. Shut up. Issei warned as his eyes started glowing brighter as his anger was getting out of control. I am not your enemy, Issei. I want to help. Seraphale tried to explain herself, but she was forced to use an ice clone as Issei was about to cut her head off her body, which Seraphale narrowly dodged with her ice clone, which stunned Issei for a single moment. Issei said nothing as he broke free before turning to Seraphale as his aura grew out of control as Issei dashed at her with his godlike speed, which Seraphale knew she couldn't dodge in time. So, she created a ton of ice pillars, creating a large wall which gave her the opening to fly in the air as Issei broke through the ice and unleashed his own demonic energy wings and flew towards Seraphale. The Devil King looked at Issei and unleashed a blizzard of ice towards him, which Issei blocked by slashing all the ice particles with his sword, but he didn't saw Seraphale coming, who came down and delivered an ice-covered fist which sent Issei back on the ground. Issei rolled back onto his feet and blocked another ice punch from Seraphale, who flew towards him with incredible speed. Are you done yet? Seraphale asked, making Issei grit his teeth as he pushed her back and tried to slash her, but Seraphale dodged it by ducking before freezing Issei's bottom half in a second as Issei was shocked at being caught so easily. Shit. Issei gritted his teeth as he manifested his boosted gear. Boost. Issei brought down his fist and broke the ice that was covering his feet as he stepped out of the ice as Seraphale kept watching him with a tiny smile on her face. That's more like it. Come at me, dragon. Seraphale urged as she took a battle stance as Issei charged at her, but Seraphale created an ice wall so fast that Issei nearly went face first against it, but Issei managed to use his revelation to cut the ice wall clean in half while firing an air blade towards Seraphale, who jumped gracefully before firing an energy beam towards Issei, who quickly dodged it. The beam turned the ground behind him into ice as the beam followed him as Issei dashed to blindside Seraphale, but the moment his blade came close to her neck, Seraphale grabbed the blade with her hand covered in an icy aura as the blade froze in her hand, making Issei clutch the hilt of the sword tightly. Need more power than that, Issei. Seraphale lectured in a sing-sang voice as Issei tried to free his sword from Seraphale's grip, but it wasn't budging. Issei merely glared at the Devil King, who patiently looked at Issei with her violet-colored eyes. Are you willing to talk now? Or do I need to convince you more to listen? Seraphale asked as she loosened the grip on Issei's sword, but when she did, Issei pulled it back and swung it straight at her neck, but when it connected with her skin, it was stopped by that part of her neck covered in ice, blocking the sword from cutting deeper. I guess it is the second option then. Seraphale muttered before blasting Issei back with a single attack. Issei rose from the rubble as he gripped his sword tightly. Boost. Issei was about to charge again at Seraphale, who blitzed him and punched him straight at the jaw with an ice-coated fist, which knocked Issei's senses off a bit as Issei went on one knee holding his head from the dizziness. Fuck you. Issei cursed. He decided that it was time to go all out. His aura rose as Seraphale was forced back by an explosion of aura as Issei appeared in his devil trigger form as the hybrid charged at Seraphale, who narrowed her eyes at him with a serious look in her eyes. This was the current Devil King Leviathan taking the battle seriously. Something that hasn't happened in centuries. As Issei charged at her with incredible speed, Seraphale covered her whole body in an icy aura before she created a spiky ice wall which Issei crashed straight through as the Red Dragon Emperor tried to land an attack on Seraphale, who used the ice to her advantage as she dodged each of Issei's attacks. Issei grew frustrated as he tried to land an attack on the Devil King, who dodged each and every one of his attacks with grace. Issei's eyes widened as he felt his body growing colder. Issei looked down and saw that parts of his body were slowly covered in ice. What? Issei asked, confused as he tried to undo the ice, but it didn't work as Issei looked worried for a moment as Seraphale walked over to him and grabbed his demonic face with her hands. You still have a lot to learn. She muttered as Issei felt his entire body being frozen completely as Issei tried to fight against the ice but couldn't release himself. Will you die for me? From this day forth, you will be mine. Issei's eyes opened as the image of both Rias and Rainier flashed in his head, making him see completely red as his aura released itself as it broke the ice, but Seraphale kept herself composed despite being so close to the enraged hybrid. Her hands didn't leave his face as she looked at the Red Dragon Emperor with pity and sadness. So much hate for someone so young. Release it, Seraphol advised as Issei tried to slash her. But Seraphol jumped out of the way and landed a few good meters from Issei and looked at him with her serious expression returning. Boost. Transfer. Issei raised his sword to the sky as Revelation started to gather an immense amount of demonic energy, as it grew much larger with the aid of the boosted gear. Issei grabbed his sword with all his might and brought it down. Dai. The beam of demonic energy came crashing down onto Seraphol, who stood still before raising her arms in the air and creating a magic circle. I'll quell your rage, Issei. That I swear. Seraphol muttered before her aura was released as it completely covered the entire area and froze everything solid. Even Issei's powerful beam that was about to reach her was frozen solid in the air, along with Issei, who was frozen in place with his sword in his hand. Seraphol snapped her fingers as the frozen beam broke into magical particles, as well with everything else that is frozen apart from Issei. Seraphol walked over to the frozen boy and stroked her hand over his frozen face and sighed before giving a small smile. Don't worry. I'm here for you. Seraphol didn't know why she did this, but instinct told her to, as she stood on her toes and connected her lips with Issei, who was still frozen solid. But like a charm, the ice covering Issei's body was undone as he fell onto his knees into Seraphol's arms, who held on to him tightly. Issei's devil trigger deactivated as the young man slept peacefully in the Devil King's arm. Seraphol didn't see it, but a stray tear left Issei's eyes as the young man slept like a baby for the first time in a long time. That's it, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed both stories. With that, take care.